Well, it's 4 after, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Once again, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us for this meeting of the Task Force on Best Academic Practices for Black Students. My name is Paulo DeMaria. I'm the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, as most of you know, and we had a wonderful first meeting about a month ago, and this is our second meeting, and I can't tell you how excited I am about the various presentations that we're going to hear today. I'm also ever so grateful that all of you took time out of your schedules to be with us today. As you know, Governor DeWine yesterday declared today a state government holiday. And this, sort of caused a little bit of panic among staff because we said, well, should we cancel the task force meeting or should we keep the task force meeting? I checked in with Jim McWilson, and he checked in with Tom Roberts, and we decided let's have this meeting. I mean, what more appropriate calling is there to undergo on this particular the first national and state holiday celebrating Juneteenth, than to address this particular topic. So I'm glad all of you, and some of you, especially members of my staff, that might have thought, okay, we have a day off. I'm ever so grateful to them for joining, and ever so grateful to all of you for joining as well. Again, I think you'll find we have an exciting agenda ahead of us and some great presentations. I will ask if either Tom Roberts or Laura Kohler have any other comments in terms of welcome before we dive into our agenda. Tom, do you want to share anything?
Sure. Thank you, Paulo, and thank you all for being here and being a part of this. You know, I was offline or was not visible at the last meeting. I was in Columbus, so I did it by phone. One of the things that dawned on me, and this will be the first of that, have any of you gone to your doctor lately? And he's asked for every bit of your family history, 3 and 4 pages of questions, and question this and question that. And that's why knowing the history, and this is why the practitioners who will be testifying today are so relevant, because they will give the history, just as our doctors ask us about our family history and our history as his patient. We're going to do the same thing as we look at bridging the gap between African-American students in education in Ohio. So I just wanted to share that with you. It dawned on me as I was visiting my doctor, and once again, he asked me for everything that he already knew, but I had to give it to him again. So thank you all for being here. And as Paulo said, on this very historical day, thank you for being a part of this historical conversation. Thank you.
Mrs. Kohler?
Well, you two gentlemen have expressed so eloquently. There's really not a whole lot I can add except to say that I too appreciate you being here on this very historic day. And I just want to let you all know that we are in for a really interesting couple of hours here. The state board under Paulo's leadership has been inviting districts to come to our meetings to share their experiences and their journey on this work. And the presentations that we've been able to witness and ask questions of the practitioners so far have been some of the most significant and eye-opening work that this board has undertaken during my tenure, at least. So I would encourage you to take full advantage of both learning from these folks who are making good headway in their journey, and to take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions and to link their work with the work that you are also doing. So thank you very much and welcome, and I'm anxious to get started.
Great, thank you.
I don't see the record button on. Is it recording?
Yes, it is. It should be that. If you have a similar screen to mine, it should be that red dot on the upper left-hand corner. Mine even says recording has started, so we're in good shape, Tom. I also want to thank those of you who sent in. As you recall, I sent out a little bit of a template because in addition to valuing the people who we've invited to present to us, we value those who were selected to be part of this task force and the work that you do in your own districts. And as you've seen, I've shared out on like now 3 separate occasions, different documents that have come in with templates from the various districts and schools that you all represent. Again, showing some of the great, not only, the deliberateness of the actions, but some of the concrete actions and the impacts that have been happening in the districts that you all serve. And we appreciate that and look forward to more of that. The first item on our agenda is I'm just going to do a quick review of the purposes of the task force, because I want us to make sure we have in our heads what we should be listening for as we listen to the presenters. And so I'm actually going to use the same PowerPoint slides that I used last time, if I can engineer the sharing function here. Give me 1 second. Hopefully you are seeing my shared screen. And I'm going to just quickly go through this. So the first purpose, and the one that's probably going to be most evident in the discussion that we have today, is this notion of understanding and identifying those best academic and, in certain cases, non-academic practice models, strategies, and actions that drive success in closing achievement gaps and supporting the academic success of Black students. So when you are listening, I want you to be especially attentive to what you hear these districts saying about those academic practice models that are working. What characterizes them? What are the different ways they've approached it? Because once we hear the 3 presentations and ask some questions, then we're going to engage in a little process of synthesizing what we've heard and beginning to think about what it is that we're going to coalesce around as we move this process forward. The second purpose is, I think, equally important, is this notion of how do you actually engineer high quality change and improvement management? What does that look like? What does it take once you identify what are those things that you want to do? How do you actually get your organization and your system to do those things? And I want to encourage our presenters to take an opportunity as part of their presentations to reflect on this idea as well, because I think so many times we see that the challenge is less about knowing what great practice looks like than actually doing great practice and helping an organization reach those levels. The third one is we talk about creating a template and a self-assessment tool. And ultimately, I think that template and self-assessment tool will be, will have a framework of different components and parts to it. Again, many of which we will extract from some of the things that we hear today. So be on the lookout for those kinds of things. And then ultimately, one of the key challenges to all of us will be to make recommendations about how do we actually disseminate and promote the use and implementation of identified best practice models. Because again, people can't implement what they don't know about. The idea is, how do we get information in front of people and encourage and motivate and incentivize those strategies that are necessary to put practices into place. We're also ultimately charged with identifying a system of measurement and monitoring. In fact, we've talked about maybe putting together a little subcommittee to work on this particular aspect of our work. And we also have the last 2 are really about how do we set expectations. Purpose 6 is really about expectations for the achievement of each child. And then Purpose 7 is really about expectations for the system and how well the system performs vis-a-vis closing achievement gaps and the academic achievement of Black students. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing here and take this opportunity to tee up our presentations. And I think I have stopped sharing. So I always like to introduce school superintendents and their teams as, you are about to hear from some of Ohio's rock star superintendents. These 3 districts were chosen because after looking at their data, given the percentage of Black students that are part of their student populations, and then also looking at the absolute performance of those students and the change in achievement over time. And these 3, there were a number of districts that rose to the top, but we felt like these 3 districts had a really particularly good story to tell on this front. And so we invited them, and they were also very gracious. Immediately when they got my email, they responded, yes, we'd love to help. I had good conversations with each of the 3 superintendents. And I think what struck me is not only their dedication to this work, but also their willingness to be vulnerable and really, give us the unvarnished story. you're not going to hear everything that's just, roses and rainbows, right? They ran into some barriers. They ran into some obstacles. They know they have more work to do. And it's that kind of frank and honest presentation that I really appreciate and enjoy, because I know we're going to get some really meaningful information and dialogue going. And again, I would suggest to all of you task force members, take a few notes as you listen. What are those key ideas, those key themes? We will ultimately share the PowerPoint slides that they present, and if there's follow-up information that we want, we can ask for that as well. But I think you are in for a real treat. We're going to start with Melinda Young from Steubenville. Steubenville is often cited for the great work they do in closing achievement gaps, and they have a fantastic story to tell. We'll be then followed by Philip Wagner at Licking Heights, also doing some amazing work in his school district and his community under particularly constrained financial circumstances. And I think he'll talk about that a little bit. And then Bob Hardis at Beechwood City is going to talk about the great things that they're doing as well. So what we'll do is we'll let them present, and we'll do a little bit of question and answer after each one. And then maybe we'll talk to them as a group at the end, and then engage in a little bit of synthesis. When we get to the question and answer part, once again, I will ask you to use the hand raising feature, which, as I said, is at the top of your screen. You see the hand palm with the smiley face behind it. If you mouse over that, you'll see a yellow hand. If you click on the yellow hand, that will raise your hand, which will bring you to the top of the list that I'm tracking, and I'll call on you to participate. And again, I would ask that participation be solely the purview of task force members. And obviously, others who are on the call are welcome to observe and watch. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to it looks like Superintendent Young, you've got a team with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with today and be with us today. And the floor is yours.
I'd also like to thank Dr. DeMaria and the task force for inviting us to present. We're hoping that we'll actually get good feedback and with your questions help us actually drive ourselves further in closing that achievement gap. I'm going to introduce my team. I have Aaron Newman. He's assistant principal at Steubenville High School. Jackie Reeves, gifted coordinator for the district. And Deanna Bell, she is our STEM principal for the elementary. Just to give you a little background of Steubenville, we're located in Jefferson County. We're in the eastern part of Ohio. Our district touches the Ohio River. We're about 40 minutes from Pittsburgh. We have 2,600 students. 855 of those students actually come from out of district through open enrollment. We're 69% economically disadvantaged, 40% minority. If you can go ahead and move the slide. And then I'm on the next slide as well. I'm sorry, I was talking too fast. We have one high school, one elementary, one middle school, and 4 elementaries. One of our elementaries just opened. This was actually their second year in operation. We had gone through a building program about 10 years ago. We closed 3 elementaries, and because of increased enrollment and also our focus on STEM, we reopened an old elementary school. We have several reform models, and I think what's a little bit interesting about Steubenville, in the early 2000s, they had Ohio Reads grants. And when we were looking to apply for those grants, our director of federal programs said that he was getting tired of us jumping from one program to another. And several of our teachers would tell us, well, I'll outlast this program as well. So we really worked very hard with our teachers and also on research, and we chose Success for All Reading. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deanna, who is going to represent our elementary and talk a little bit about that reform model and how we went about choosing it, and also how we stuck with it for 21 years.
Hi, everyone. Success for All is the curriculum that Mrs. Young is speaking about. With Success for All, it's a rigorous data-driven.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a rigorous data-driven curriculum that groups students by learning level appropriateness rather than chronological age. So the students are grouped at their mastery level, and is it the next slide? There we go. That's good. That's good. they are grouped by their mastery levels. So there may be some first graders that are functioning and mastering up to a second grade level or even a third grade level. So they are completing their tasks in those types of groups. They are cooperative learning groups. Obviously this year was a little bit different with the masks and the shields in the classrooms. It was very beneficial for the kids. They were still able to partner read and use cooperative learning tactics. Our reading program is 90 minutes each day, and our math program is 75 minutes of uninterrupted learning. Preschool is provided in all of our elementary schools. It's offered 5 days a week, all day, every day. So there's also a tutoring program that is inclusive within the reading program that all students are provided if necessary. We also have implemented in the Success for All curriculum a character ed program called Getting Along Together. It provides students weekly cooperative learning groups where they are provided character education by their teachers. Sometimes the school psychologist is in there, as well as a counselor within the district. Distributive leadership is, I'm just going to touch a little bit upon, and then Mrs. Reeves and Mr. Newman are going to really hold into it. In the elementary schools, the teachers are provided with groups that they are part of through the Success for All curriculum. They're called solutions teams, and we will touch upon that a little bit later as well. It's the solutions teams are teacher-based teams, and they help provide new stakeholders to come into the district and help bring their knowledge to impact the students each day. As I said before, it is a data-driven program that the teachers are able to use to find success in all of the students. The teachers are provided ongoing professional development each year with a district coach that's provided from the Success for All curriculum. So that's just a little overview of what we do at the elementary and middle school levels. I said before, I could sit and talk about Success for All for all day long, but there's obviously way more to touch upon. So I look forward to your questions as the meeting goes on.
And Aaron Newman's going to talk a little bit about Schools That Work. It was actually a program that we started in 2013, and that was actually driven by teacher teams that were looking at what the middle school and the high school were, the middle school and the elementary doing, and they wanted some program that was somewhat similar to that, and that used to be the old program was High Schools That Work and making middle grades work. And we adopted those programs in 2013, and I'll let Aaron talk about that.
Hi, everybody. So as far as the Schools That Work framework goes, the first two bullet points kind of, I would say those are coupled together, because you have to engage students through quality instruction. And what I would say is that the work must be engaging, and we engage not all children, but each child. Wherever they are, we meet them where they are, and we try to push them to ensure that we maximize their potential as a learner. As far as what the instruction is, of course, it's aligned. We have a curriculum that's aligned to state standards, and then we also very much believe in the career ready path for those students that may not be going to college, because we certainly have a wide spectrum. We are a diverse district, and we're really diverse when it comes to the socioeconomics. We have students that live in what I would essentially abject poverty, and then students that live quite comfortable, and then everything in between. So it's very important to us that we are able to meet those students wherever they are, engage them in the curriculum, that curriculum that's aligned to those state standards, and then ensure that we get them on the pathway that is that best suits them, whether that's a college-bound pathway or potentially into a career. And again, that kind of also dovetails into bullet 3 that talks about students exploring careers and becoming either college ready or career ready. It is with that, and I know, I mean, in Ohio, we want to ensure that our students, when they come out of high school, are either college or career ready. That is the rule of the road in Steubenville City Schools. Each student should be either college bound or into a career. That is our charge. We take it seriously. And every day that we walk through the doors to our respective buildings, that's the mission. We provide student supports, and there's myriad supports provided to our students. For example, we may have a student that's struggling in Algebra 2 at the high school level. They would, and we identify that through reviewing our data, our achievement data, communication lines open at all levels, instructional staff, support staff, administrative staff, and other partners, other stakeholders. If a student's struggling in Algebra 2, I'm going to create a Khan Academy account. In Khan Academy is we believe in the efficacy of that program. We utilize it. And so that can provide some targeted intervention for a student that may be struggling in that particular course. At the same time, we may have a student that is dealing with some type of health issue. We have a partnership with Changing Health. We have a clinic in the high school where we're able to send a student that might not have access to healthcare outside of school. We're able to meet their healthcare needs in school. At the same time, we may have a student that's in a mental health crisis of some kind. We have in-house therapeutic supports. There's therapy taking place in our building at the high school every single day.
That's not just the high school, that's every school.
And I'm sorry, I'm kind of speaking on behalf of the high school, but really, everything I said relative to student wellness. Physical and mental health wellness applies pre-K, essentially
Pre-K to 12.
Pre-K through 12. Mrs. Young does a great job of promoting leadership and really supporting a culture where there's continuous improvement. We are not satisfied. We are never satisfied. We always want to do better. While I think that, I would say that I think we do a pretty good job. It's never good enough. That again, that's kind of the mindset that everybody I know in this room, everybody in my building, everybody in Deanna's building, that's kind of the mindset that we bring into work each and every day. We have to do better. We need to identify through looking at our data, and also just the anecdote, knowing our kids, knowing our building, where we need to get better, and then implementing, practices, programs to meet those needs. And then, one of the things that's on there is the 10 key practices. And I can just real quick go through those with you guys. A culture of high expectations. And, something that I would say is, our high expectations apply to all students. From students that may fall in a subgroup to students that are performing, that have a 4.0 plus GPA. Our expectations are high for each child, not all, each, because they're all, as we know, every child that walks through our doors has a different set of circumstances that they're dealing with, and we want to make sure that our expectations are high for all. Personalized programs for students, whether they're college or career bound, an integrated curriculum, equitable access to high quality career paths. Equity is something, again, I think that, kind of goes along with when I talk about each child. Our kids having equal opportunity to the programs that we offer and the supports we offer. Again, that's a rule of the road at Steubenville City Schools. We have an advanced career program that it is good right now. We're looking to make it great, and we have plans to make it great. We utilize research-based practices PBIS is something that's been happening here before it was a mandate, but it's something that we feel like is growing and getting even better and positively impacting kids each and every day, pre-K through 12. Teacher collaboration is certainly just it's what we do. Teacher collaboration, teacher administrative collaboration. I mean, there's collaboration in all of our buildings between everybody. I mean, whether it's support staff, instructional staff, or leadership staff. We're project-based, work-based learning, again, is one of our key practices. Guidance, you know, our guidance office and, you know, all of our buildings, you know, we're there for kids. We keep an eye on things. We're small enough to be quite personal. And recognize when there's everything from a change in academic performance to a change in demeanor of a particular student, and insert supports, you know, to meet the needs and make sure that we know what's going on with that particular student. And then extra help, as I mentioned, we have mentoring programs, tutoring programs. We utilize Khan Academy. It's very important to us that if there is a gap, we do what we can to fill that gap or provide that support. And then we have acceleration programs through utilization of CCP, which Mrs. Reeves will talk a little bit more about. But those are our key practices, and all of those things that I just discussed, that it's really who we are and what we're about. So I think that would conclude my Schools That Work slide. And that would take us over to the STEM. The next slide would be STEM education.
Okay, so STEM education, I'm going to talk a little bit about the advanced career programs because those are housed at Steubenville High School, and then Deanna will go into some of the other STEM education projects we have going on. Advanced careers were adopted in the district in 2014. Right now we're offering IST Aviation, which is our aerospace and engineering program, health informatics, and global logistics at this point. The best thing about these programs are they have community partnerships. The aviation program is partnered with the Pittsburgh Airport, and the global logistics is partnered with Walmart Distribution. So our students are making connections already for jobs after high school. They're working actively with their instructors and their partnership to make sure that they can ensure a job after they graduate from us once they complete these programs. Right now, like Aaron said, these programs are good and we're looking at making them great. We're in our 6th year and we are finally to a point where we are offering 2 sections of each of course 1. So we're actively gaining interest among the students to take these careers on. This has a variety of students in them. You'll have your CCP students who are interested in one of the programs, as well as your workforce kids who are looking at just going to get a job after high school. So it's a variety of kids in these programs, and we are excited to see where they go.
As mentioned, I'm the principal at the elementary STEM school. We have 3 programs that we have adopted in the elementary portion that are now, after the success of this year and part of last year, I should say, has shown we are ready to put them into the other 3 elementary schools. Our first one is Project Lead the Way. Project Lead the Way, we house in a idea lab in the elementary school. In my building, it is a smaller atmosphere with about 150 students in it. So I'm able to make the schedule a little bit nice and use that as a co-teaching atmosphere. So there is a lab teacher who is trained through Project Lead the Way, as well as a classroom teacher. So they're able to co-teach and collaborate with one another to utilize Project Lead the Way. We were also just awarded a distinguished honor through the nation through Project Lead the Way at the beginning of this week. So that's something that we just received knowledge upon and we're very pleased about. We also use a program called Invention Land. We use this in our makerspace. I tell everybody that I give a tour to, this is where all the magic happens. The kids love this lab. They're able to use the engineering design process and use their imaginations to do all kinds of different project-based applications. This is something that they love to do. They think it's the greatest place in the world, and they are able to use their imaginations in there, and they love it. We also have received a grant from the farm to school grant, which is an agricultural grant. We have purchased greenhouses for each of the schools within the district. This one at McKinley STEM Academy is the largest within the district. We were able to do poinsettias out of it. We have all the children receive go in there once a week for a science lab. They were able to make hanging baskets. They grew from the start of their little seedlings, and then they grew up, and then they planted them and sold them as to the community.
And they sold out in one day, by the way. That was a big hit.
We did sell out in one day. Actually, we sold out in about 10 minutes. It was unbelievable. I was like, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. But it was very exciting. With this farm to school grant, it has grown. Next school year, we are going to have a 4-H group within the district next year. So that is something that's very promising. The kids love to be outside. The kids are teaching me, because I really don't have a green thumb, I should say. So they're teaching me how to be a part of the agricultural society. And it's always been told to me since I was a teacher that when the high school students do surveys, the big thing that comes back is they want to be part of the agricultural society. So this is hopefully getting them started and helping them become part of that. Mrs. Young, do you want to touch upon the future STEM addition?
We're actually using stimulus money to build an addition to Steubenville High School. We're really out of space. We this year had quite a challenge with going back to school. We actually were able, with COVID, to still start school on time and stay in school for the whole year. But what we want to do is build an addition to Steubenville High School that would focus on STEM, and we're using part of our stimulus money to be able to do that, and we're hoping that it'll open in fall of 2023. The high school also houses an elementary school, so that's why it's so critical for us to add space there and also give our elementary students in another school other than McKinley those options for STEM education. That's why we're hoping with our advanced careers that we'll be able to extend those careers for our students and just really help them. I guess our big goal with our STEM addition is in Steubenville, our students typically leave. Once they go away to college, they don't come back to Steubenville. And we're hoping with STEM that we'll be able to provide them with good, solid middle-class jobs if they can choose to stay in the area. We're lucky enough to have a community college right in Steubenville and also Franciscan University. So if they want to extend their education, that option would be available for them as well. But hopefully that they would choose to stay in Steubenville. And that also ties into us trying to get minority teachers as well.
Go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about our reform models district-wide. I guess the most important thing to point out when we're looking at our reform models is once they prove they work, we end up adopting them throughout the buildings in the district. We also, as Mrs. Young stated in the beginning, it was brought to their attention, 20-some years ago, that they were tired of jumping from program to program and teachers saying that they could outlive this program. So once we see that they work, we keep them. SFA has been up and running for over 20 years now. Steubenville High School adopted Schools That Work in 2013. We began our advanced career program in 2014. Steubenville High School also began CCP in 2014 with 2 pathways for students to earn credit. A lot of our area schools with the CCP, it's an expensive model. We took it when it was offered through the state as this is the best thing for our students to be successful, especially our first generation college students, because what proves success in college? Being successful in a college course. So this was a way for us to reach a whole nother population to ensure that they would be successful after they left high school. We also started a Maymester in 2018 at Steubenville High School. It's a 20-day period of project-based learning. We offer CCP courses during that time, as well as blocked courses like there's a bioethics course, and they debate bioethic issues in that course. They meet for a 90-minute period. Harding Middle School adopted SFA reading in 2009 after it was proven to be successful in the elementary buildings, and SFA math in 2011. They took on Making Middle Grades Matter in 2013, and they adopted May semester this year, 2021. It was supposed to be up and running last year, obviously, but the school closure, next slide, I'm sorry. The school closure obviously put it off for a year. The elementary schools adopted SFA reading in 2000.
One more slide.
One more slide, sorry.
Yep.
SFA math in 2001, Making Schools Work in 2019, and they adopted the May semester this year as well. I believe some districts had piloted it the year before.
One of the elementary schools had piloted
Wells
Academy had piloted it
in
2019. Yeah, in 2019. And then we were all supposed to do it last year, but obviously with the closures of schools, we started it this year.
And what is so nice about the Maymester is students are able to take courses that they typically wouldn't take during your regular school year. Our attendance rate is actually higher during Maymester than it is during the regular school year. The kids are excited to be there. They presented at the board meetings. They will say things like, we're doing projects and we're learning, and you don't even know that you're learning while you're doing this project. It's a very exciting time across the district during May. It's right after state testing. It ends the year on a positive note. We were able to get away from movies for a whole week. We were able to get away from word searches for a whole week. You know, we were able to really focus on skills that will make students successful after. We have a landscaping class, and there's a group of students who go to the elementary to middle school. They cut branches, they edge the yard. You know, it's really a great program.
And at the elementary level, we did a theme. So each elementary school had a theme for the whole month. One was fitness and health. At McKinley, we did the Olympics. I think at West, they did a fitness thing as well. Same with, in East did country, around the world. So it was something that was so nice for the kids, and they were able to do a different project each day that went along with the Maymester theme.
And really, I mean, Maymester, the hallmarks of Maymester are PBL, project-based learning, and really what I would call extension. And obviously you have CCP options at the high school, but you also have courses that are essentially extension, enrichment, elective type courses that really broaden students' horizons and expose them to ideas, content, material, whatever, that they wouldn't or otherwise be exposed to. And again, it's May, the month, that last month of school. It's such a great way to end the school year. And I know Mrs. Reeves and Mrs. Bell touched on that, but I just want to reiterate it. I mean, our kids literally were like high-fiving on the way out the door on the last day of school. It just is a really positive, it really has a positive impact, I think, really on the culture and climate. I think we already have a good culture and climate. It really puts the exclamation point on at the end there during Maymester. It's really successful.
And it also gives us time for credit recovery at the high school as well. So any of our students who are behind or haven't passed a course, they have that opportunity at that time to make that up so they can start the next year where they need to be.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. So at Stonewall City Schools, these are several of our key components that are models for success for us. I mean, distributed leadership, again, what I would call it kind of a rule of the road for how we operate. There's several examples of it, the BLT at the high school level, we empower our teacher leaders. They know they have a voice. Their voice matters. It really does. Our leadership team, meaning our administrative team, we are not micromanagers. We certainly provide oversight and ensure that things are progressing and moving the way they need to move. But we do empower staff, particularly teacher leaders that we know are committed to our kids and committed to positive outcomes. So whether it's BLT or something like PBIS, I oversee PBIS, and the reality is the best ideas that the PBIS team came up with this year were not my ideas. They were the ideas of the team members. And it's, it's important to us that our people know that their voice is important, it's heard, and not just heard, but we act upon. When there's good ideas, we embrace it, and we're not worried about who gets credit for it. And again, that's something that I think that's a pervasive across all buildings and all grade levels. Then is that kind of ties also into the teacher-led component. I am fine as an administrator at the high school with teachers and or support staff leading the change. If it leads to positive outcomes for students, particularly at-risk students, particularly students that fall into subgroups, that's fine. And I want to hear all good ideas. I don't care where they come from necessarily, and I don't care if I get credit for it. And I know that's exactly the way that Mrs. Young leads this district. It's not about who gets credit, it's about positive outcomes for kids. We're focused and we base our actions on what the data tells us. Teachers are not in isolation doing their own things. It's a collaborative culture, whether it's BLT or department meetings, TBTs. We very much believe in working together and collaborating. In our teams, cooperative culture, community connections, intervention, attendance, parent and family involvement. You see that at all levels, from an absence intervention team to a principal advisory committee that we had that was a group of students, a diverse group of students, not the top 10 students from all demos were included in our principal advisory committee. And I mean, that's just a couple examples, but I think it's our strength is our diversity. Our strength is, our approach to meeting the needs of each child. And I know I keep saying it, but I think it's important because it really is how we approach what we do. Anything else?
Okay, we go on to the next slide. I'm going to talk about College Credit Plus. This is probably one of my favorite reform models at the high school. It's a state mandated program. I love the options it offers students. I love the money it saves students when they leave to go to a 4-year university, or if they choose to go into the workforce, they already have a degree. So right now, College Credit Plus is offered all in-house. There's two reasons this program, I believe, at Steubenville High School is so successful. One is we offer everything in our school. So our students do not have to leave Steubenville High School to earn their Associate of Art degree from Eastern Gateway Community College. I think that speaks volumes. They're able to still be a high school student with us. They get all of their high school experiences. They are still connected to us. I am able to intervene if I need to intervene with them. So I think that proves somewhat of a success. Then we have an active partnership with Eastern Gateway Community College. And when I say active, it is very active. Sarah Fletcher, the director of College Credit Plus, and Patrick Carbon, the advisor, work with me. They come to all of my meetings. They come and meet with our students. Patrick Carbon has actually held office hours in our building if students need to see him about an issue. In 2017, we were able to graduate 7 students with an AA degree. There was 1 minority student at that time. This year, 42 students graduated with an Associate of Art degree. 9 of them are first-generation college students, which just already broke a cycle right there because they already have a degree. 40 of them are enrolling into a 4-year university, and 2 students are enrolling into a trade program. Another part of our success with College Credit Plus to make sure that we are identifying all students is in 8th grade when we hold our parent meeting. We have every 8th grade student applies for the program. And then every 8th grade student is then tested through AccuPlacer so that we are able to not miss anybody. We don't want any student to fall through the cracks there. So we test every single 8th grade student with AccuPlacer. Eastern Gateway comes into Harding Middle School to administer the exam. They take 3 days in February to administer that exam. This year, one great thing of COVID was we didn't have to test students. We could use a 3.0 rule. So with that, we were able to identify 132 new students who are going to be eligible to take CCP coursework next year at the high school, in addition to our students who were already taking coursework. I already gave you guys the stats, but this year out of our graduating class, 25% of the students graduated with an Associate of Art degree. It's around 60% take courses at Steubenville High School. 20% were minority students that graduated with that Associate of Art degree this year. And that's basically it.
The one key with the College Credit Plus is the instructors are actually instructors from Eastern Gateway. So our students are actually being exposed at the same time. They're in a little bit of a cocoon at the high school, being taken care of while they're given those opportunities. So we really feel, very happy that the state went ahead and kind of made that College Credit Plus a lot easier for schools to implement. Okay, that's all we have. I don't know if there's any questions.
Fantastic. What an amazing story. I really appreciate everybody's contribution. Let's go ahead and move right into questions. I see Tom Roberts has his hand up. Tom, you want to start?
Thank you. Thank you. And can you hear me? I was very impressed by that. And let me commend you on the farm to school. That addresses one of the major concerns I'm sure you have and we have, and that is food insecurity. And it helps those students learn how to be farmers and how to do it at home. I had 2 questions. One is, when you were talking about the student who may be struggling with Algebra 2, and you said something about how to communicate, lines of communication. How is that done? Is that done in the traditional plan where the parent and the teacher sits down with the student and works on that? But how is that physically done, that line of communication?
Good question. We have policies and procedures in place. So, it could happen. There are various ways that it could happen. But for example, a student, we have a very active guidance office at the high school. And so I've had students stop in and express to me their concern because they're struggling in a particular class. And so that's one potential pathway for an intervention. But also, our teachers, we have policies and procedures in place where teachers must communicate with parents, but also with the leadership team if a student is struggling in a particular class, so that we can intervene in a timely manner, not after they've already received an F, but prior to that. So, because and sometimes it may be where a teacher has attempted to communicate with a parent and has not been successful for whatever reason, and that gets referred down to the guidance office. This year I probably had it would be approaching triple digits meetings with students that I actually called down, talked to them about what was going on in that particular class, and talked to them about how we could go about intervening. I didn't necessarily use that word with them. In Khan Academy, I have found is a very effective program, but there could be potential obstacles. For example, does that student have a computer at home? If the answer is no, I would issue them a Chromebook that they could take home and use at home. There are even some examples where, okay, do you have a computer? Do you have Wi-Fi at home? And because we do have a large percentage of economically disadvantaged households, sometimes Wi-Fi was not present at the house. So we actually provided hotspots to homes so that students would have Wi-Fi. could take home the Chromebook and log on to Khan Academy. And by the way, when I would set up the Khan Academy account, one of the things, part of the deal is that I get to monitor their progress to ensure that they're logging on and they're actually utilizing the supports that come along with Khan. And again, free program, standards aligned. I can't say enough. I would sing Khan Academy's praises all day. Not to mention their SAT prep is fantastic. I've utilized Khan for that purpose as well.
Okay, so you what you're saying, there are multiple levels of intervention that we need to be thinking about, or schools need to be thinking about. The second one, because I would like others to get it, because I think we have 2 or 3 other questions. The other question, Paulo, is how does a student feel? And if I understand what you're saying, in the reading, it's based on their level of reading. So let's say I'm a 8th grader and I'm with 3rd or 4th graders. Does that ever happen? And how does that 8th grader feel about being in a lower class? That's the real question. How do I feel as an upperclassman being in a group of students which are lower class?
Now, with the EDGE program at the middle school actually is grade level. So the students at that point, they might be somewhat grouped by where they're, their area, but they would be 5th graders on a 5th grade level. Our middle school's 5 through 8. At the elementary school, they're grouped by their achievement levels, but we would never put a 4th grader with a 1st grade class.
I guess my question was, how does an upperclassman feel when he's in a class with the students who are in a lower grade class than he or she is in?
They're not, because at the middle school level, it's a different program of SFA. It's called Reading Edge. So at the middle school level, they will be housed in a group maybe with other 8th graders that maybe in that band. Like they have the bands for like 3rd through 5th grade. It'd be somebody that's in that band, and the teacher is usually an intervention specialist that is teaching them. So and it's a small group. So let's say that there are 10 kids in the 8th grade that may be functioning below grade level. They are presented material at an 8th grade level at times, because those are, they have to take the test and they have to be introduced to it. But when they are provided interventions within the classroom, they are provided maybe a little bit lower, things like that. They are not grouped with a 3rd grader by any means ever.
Okay.
Ever.
Thank you and keep.
Thank you, Tom. Let's go to Marsha Maccabee next. Marsha?
Thanks, Paulo. And let me just say, amazing inputs into this district that make opportunities for students to be successful. So my questions, and there are 2 quick ones. One has to do with the comment about being culturally responsive practices. Could you speak a little bit more about your culturally responsive practices, specifically as they relate to Black children?
I mean, yes, I would be happy to speak on that some. When I came home, because this is home, I'm a proud graduate of Steubenville High School, class of '95. I was in Northeast Ohio. Some people on the call may have heard me talking earlier. I was at Maple Heights and then Streetsboro prior to coming here. I love Northeast Ohio, but there's no place like home, and my family's here. One of the things that we did 2 years ago, we are into book studies, and we it's not just something that the leadership team does. It's something that we ask and mandate that our teachers do, whether it's equity or trauma-informed instruction or culturally responsive practices. 2 years ago, a few days before school started, we actually put all of our teachers on a bus and drove around the city of Steubenville. While many of our teachers do live in Steubenville, all of them do, and some of them live in parts of Steubenville, like any town. There are parts of Steubenville where some houses are nicer than, I mean, there are socioeconomic levels built into how a town is laid out. We thought it was important that our teachers see where our students live. And we actually went and drove the bus routes and the pickup points and had teachers drive down streets and see homes that the reality is they otherwise wouldn't see, because we thought it was important that they see and really feel where our kids come from. Because not all our kids come from stable environments where there's two parents and there's somebody checking to see if they're doing their homework. We have a lot of students that are responsible for watching siblings while parents are at work. And so it's hard for them maybe to get a particular assignment done. That's why we believe in multiple chances for success, not firm zeros or zero tolerance policies. This is, so I know I'm kind of talking about a few different things here, but like that to me is an example of us taking a concrete step to ensure that we are culturally responsive and that we understand that our kids bring a variety of experiences, life experiences. And those experiences they don't shed those experiences when they walk through the door of the school. They bring those experiences with them. And if our teachers aren't familiar with what those experiences are, what potential trauma these kids have endured or experienced, that they are not going to be able to effectively instruct them. They're not going to be able to effectively build the kind of relationships, trust, and rapport that you need to really engage a child. So that's just an example. I think I thought the bus trip, I know because I saw the looks on people. I remember seeing the looks on some of our teachers' faces as we drove down Maxwell Avenue, as we drove down Summit. These are streets. The reality is there were some people on the bus that had never been on these streets. I think that's just one powerful anecdote of some of the things that we do to ensure our teachers know who our kids are and know the baggage. And I do not mean that in a negative connotation, but the reality is that there are kids that they've been through a lot and they continue to go through a lot. And we have to recognize that, accept that, and meet the needs of those kids.
Okay,
So
thank you. Thank you. The second part of my question is, what does your disaggregated data tell you about the impact of all these wonderful inputs that are there in that school? What is the impact upon success for this group of students? Thank you.
The data shows that the structure and consistency of the programs that we provide for all of the students, or as Mr. Newman said, each of the students, is very positive. As Mrs. Reeves stated, 25% of our students graduated with an associate's degree. 20% of them were of a minority group, which is fabulous. I mean, obviously the consistency in the structure that they are provided from preschool all the way to 12th grade is something of a success for them. And it just continues to build as they further their education after they leave Steubenville High School.
And we're also seeing with our gifted identification, that was a group probably 20 years ago that we start looking at that we were underrepresenting, and I can let the gifted coordinator talk, our minorities in, and we started support systems at our elementary with the highest minority population, and I'll let her talk a little bit about that, but it actually, there right now, we're 40% minority and about 30% of our gifted students are minority. We're not still where we want to be, but we came from 10% to 30%. But I'll let her talk a little bit about that.
It's always an area I'm constantly looking at trying to improve in the district. Anytime I go to a conference, I sit in on all the minority identification, how to identify minority students, how to close that gap. So I became the gifted coordinator in 2015. Yes, 2016. I'm sorry, 2016. The year prior to, I was being trained under our old gifted coordinator, and we did tour all kinds of districts in Ohio to try to implement models. We went to Columbus City, and this was not their model. They took it from somebody else. But the PETS program, we implemented at East Elementary. It's an early intervention primary reading skills program. That's our building with our highest minority population. We implemented that there. We are now seeing they do small groups in kindergarten and first grade. Then they work with those students again in second grade who are performing at higher levels with those primary thinking skills. And then I test them. We also at East, it's kind of like a service all grades model where they use a pull-out model in each grade as like you would go to art class or music class. It's receiving not gifted services because they're not identified, but I would code it like gifted prep, like they're working on puzzles. They're looking at tanagrams. They're using the PETS program there as well to try to identify more students. I also use building norms at East Elementary to identify students, to provide them services to try to close that gap as well. So we know that the state of Ohio requires you to have a 95th percentile or 125 for gifted education. If my building norms are showing 85 at East Elementary, the 85th percentile, I use the 85th percentile to provide those student services. Then also, that we're starting to see now where East is finally, we're starting to identify more students. For example, my second round of testing this year at East, I actually was able to identify 4 students in second grade. Weld Academy, which has a much lower minority population, I identified no students in second grade. Not that that's a success for Wells, but I think that's showing that these programs are working at East Elementary.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go now to Venezuela Robinson and then Earl Johnson, and then we'll move on to the next presentation. Venezuela, go ahead.
Thank you. One of my questions was asked already concerning how the upperclassmen felt with lowerclassmen in reading groups. But my second question is, how do you encourage parent involvement? Do you seek their input as community stakeholders, decision makers? And do you have parent groups in your schools?
Yeah, we have parent groups in all of the schools. In the elementary, we call them second cups of coffee. And it was kind of funny because the elementaries had done it for years and years. And one of our high school principal married an elementary principal, and she always used cups of coffee. So he actually had the same program. And the first year that he implemented it, he had more parents showing up for his, his sessions than she had for hers. But with that second cup of coffee, in the elementaries, they do it by grade levels because we actually work with the parents on the reading and the math program, because part of the SFA is they do 20 minutes of reading every night, and they also have math homework every day. At the middle school and the high school, what they did is they do it monthly, that they have parents come in, and they can either come in remotely or they can actually come in person, and they cover different types of topics. The one topic that I actually was present for was social media, and that was a well-attended event with parents at that time. And if we can get them in the buildings, which we really like, because we like people to come in our buildings and actually see what we're doing. When they're there, the principals will usually take them on some type of tour somewhere in the building to show them something that's going on. But those second cup of coffees at all levels have been very successful. And we have parents on all of our advisory committees, of course.
At the elementary level, we also do literacy evenings, one each semester, sometimes 2. And that incorporates like a family atmosphere. The children come in with their parents. They're able to do crafts and do social emotional things. So that's something that's very positive, getting the kids in and the parents and the families and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to end with Merle Johnson. Merle, go ahead.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. My first question is, as far as teacher scheduling, is there collaboration time scheduled during the day, or does that collaboration take place outside of the school day?
At the middle school, they're able to schedule that they can do cross grade, like they have all 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. They can have a common plan. Unfortunately, at the high school, I don't believe they have common plans, do they?
Somewhat.
We are this year implementing a 9th grade academy, and Mr. Newman can speak about that probably a little bit more. But our 9th grade students, because we know that's the first you have to do well your 9th grade year to be successful from that point on. If we're behind 9th grade, we're going to be catching up the whole time. So this year we're implementing a 9th grade academy. We'll have the same team of teachers, and those teachers are going to have 6 period plans, and they're able to meet together to provide interventions and communication with families together as a team. This was adopted from where Mr. Newman came from, I believe.
Yeah, we had at Maple Heights, we had small learning communities at Maple Heights High School, included in that was the Freshman Academy. I was blessed to be the Freshman Academy principal. That was actually my first administrative assignment. And having team planning as opposed to a department plan, where all English teachers are off. What we're looking to do is have all teachers that teach freshmen will have the same planning period. So they're able to meet and discuss, look at data, identify, trend data, identify deficiencies. So yes, the academic achievement side, but then also, particular students, maybe positives and or potential issues with a specific student or any other issue that would come up, because those teachers are going to be instructing the same students. And I do believe a team planning approach, I think the efficacy in that is pretty well proven, and there's data to support that, and that's something that we're going to be implementing this year, and we're excited to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, with the elementaries, what they do, because they do all of the solution teams, and the teachers are required to be on those teams. The support people are encouraged, but they're not required. But we're lucky enough in the elementary building that all of the support people are actually on one of the solution teams. They meet either 30 minutes before school starts or 30 minutes after school ends. In the meetings, we've been doing it long enough that we're able to keep those meetings pretty tight, and they can actually get their work done in that time. I know it sounds like a short amount of time, but the teachers and the support staff, they have all of the material ahead of time. So when they come to the meeting, they can actually do their work.
Okay, thank you. During my teaching experience, we were able to have common planning periods, and the parents loved it because they were able to meet with all the teachers at one time.
Yeah,
so
that is the best practice.
Great way to do that. My second question, I was interested when you said the expression on the teachers' faces when they did the tour through Steubenville, and I'm wondering, how do you make sure that teachers' expectations are not lowered after they experience where some of their children live?
I think it would be just the opposite, to be honest with you. I think that they are surprised that they get up in the morning, they come to school, they're ready to learn, and giving what they saw on that community drive. I used to teach at East Elementary School before I became a principal, and for those students to come into school after things that we as adults knew that occurred in their home environment the night before, with them coming into school, being able to, they had their breakfast at school, they had their lunch at school. I mean, that's their happy place. We as educators have to realize that we are their happy place, that we have to be their positive of the day. And for them to be able to, maybe they can't read a full fluent paragraph, but they can pick out sight words and they can do this. You have to look at the positive. And I think that the teachers on that day were so surprised that, oh my goodness, maybe Johnny over here really had a rough night, and I have to just be excited that he's at school today.
That's wonderful.
If I could jump into, we have a culture of high expectations. That was one of the things that I talked about. And I mean, and that really is, I mean, we have high expectations for our special ed students. We have high expectations for our economically disadvantaged students. And that's something that we talk about. But I hear what you're saying. You know, when teachers see a dilapidated structure that happens to be where student A lives, how do they not lower
Their
expectations? And that's where it's our job to ensure that our expectations, that the rigor of the curriculum is maintained. But I think it gives us an opportunity to have conversations about things like multiple chances for success.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how difficult it is, and I would say especially with teachers that have been doing it for a while, to get out of their mind, okay, the assignment wasn't turned in today. A 0 out of 100 is going to have a devastating impact on students' grade and could potentially lead to them saying, well, what's the point in me trying now moving forward? That bus ride really enabled us to have constructive conversations around some of the things that we wanted to implement, particularly multiple chances for success, and also just recognizing that here's the reality. You know, the kid walks through the door at 7:45, and at 2:30 they're going home, and they're going home to whatever issues, problems that exist in that home. And it opened our teachers' eyes to that. And I think empathy is the more appropriate word. Sympathy, yes, some, but empathy. And I think you cannot be an effective teacher without having empathy. And not all teachers have empathy. And I'm not going to sit here and say all of our teachers do. I think most do. And that's something that we continue to work on. And I think that it's something that we continue to work on statewide. But, you know, that's kind of how we utilize that particular that field trip. Good way, a teacher field trip.
But I also think too, when you see where some of these students come from and you see that they might have broken windows, you even want to have higher expectations in your classroom because you want them to be able to hold a successful job at Walmart distribution, or you want them to go to Kent State and become the teacher that they want to become. So I think it also has that effect that you see these conditions they're living in and they need something better in their life. So we provide the empathy, like Mr. Newman said, but we even raise the bar to ensure that they're being successful.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Steubenville, thank you so very, very much for your great presentation. I want to go ahead and shift to Licking Heights and Superintendent Philip Wagner. Again, one of the things I'm going to do with all three of these districts is follow up with a little bit of a request follow-up question. So if you didn't have a chance to ask your question of Steubenville and may not have your chance to ask questions, I'll collect those from you electronically. We'll do a little bit of follow-up. That way we can keep the presentations going. It's about 2:15 now, so we've got another hour and 15 minutes. So Phil, take it away. You and your team.
Okay, so you can see the PowerPoint. It's just me actually, so I'll go through. I'll just jump right in. So if you
Great,
can go to
Phil,
the
I
next.
appreciate that.
What's that?
I appreciate that it's just you. Thanks so much. And go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm actually having one of those days, so I'm logged in twice because I'm supposed to be in Chicago. I'm off of work today. I'm supposed to be in Chicago. My youngest just moved there for a job. I graduated college, and we ended up with some flight problems, so we're driving. So I'm actually broadcasting live from Indiana right now. So we stopped here. So, but anyways, let's just jump right in. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the district. We have about 4,800 students in the school district. We are located 16 miles east of city of Columbus. Very fast growing school district. We straddle 2 counties. We have a part of the district in Franklin County and a part of the district in Licking County. Geographically, about 10% of our boundaries are within Franklin County, but interestingly, that's 67% of our student population. So the remaining third of our student population sits in the 90% of Licking County, and hence we're very fast growing. So I'm gonna go to the next slide, please. One of the things that's an interesting dynamic with our school district is watching the fast growth. This is my 10th year in the school district, so I came in the 2011 school year. But you can see how fast the growth trend has been. And if you go to the next slide, please. This slide shows where we're headed. Interestingly, We're a little off in our 21 numbers there. We're not quite 4,900 with COVID. We ended up really just seeing a plateau, not much of an increase. But interestingly, we've seen a high turnover rate this year. So from the start of the year to the end of the school year, we had a 22% turnover in the student body, which is very high for us. Typically, because of the fast growth, we are always adding students, but that is an extraordinarily high turnover rate. Interestingly, when you look at the district and you go back 20 years, we've had a 330% growth rate. So it brings some interesting challenges when you're working in the school district, because you really have really on two fronts. We're always in this program improvement, enhancement aspect, but also dealing with new families and new students into the district. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see that we have, this is the enrollment of our students. The top, if you will, I've grouped them by K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. The top just shows the actual numbers, and below shows percentages by grade level. This has been rather stable for years. We haven't seen an overall growth or increase in our African American or Black population generally, a little bit here and there, but that's fairly typical. Interestingly, we because of the transient aspect, as I said, we often see more movement in and out of the district in the early childhood grades. Part of that deals with housing, and I can talk about that later if you want, and what we've been doing and what we're headed toward. Please go to the next slide. So one of the things, here's some actual data if you look at our school district, and I can show you by grade level and core area. Overall, this data doesn't show doesn't show everything that we would expect in terms of growth. But again, in our early childhood grades, we have a lot of turnover of students. So, we see some increases, but you can see the trend. It's very hard to measure this data or measure this, I would say, because of the transient aspect of the population. Please go to the next slide. We start seeing more stability, though, is in grades 6 through 8, and you'll see it more in grades 9 through 12. You can start to see the upward trend, though, generally, in how our students are performing. This data is all longitudinal, so we watch it as it is. But you would think that if you saw some advances in 6th grade or where the students are, you would see that in 7th grade in ELA and on to 8th. But that's our actual data. Go to the next slide, please. This is where it gets interesting because you see our best results here, sans geometry, but you see our best results here by area and how well we're closing some gaps. I should have said earlier too, this obviously takes into account all this data is from the 15-16 school year and goes into 18-19. We don't really have any good reliable report card data. No school districts really do because of COVID and what's occurred. But there's a good trend here. And I can talk more about this and why we think this is occurring. And also part of it is because there's more stability in the student base, not as much movement, but there's also some other aspects. So if you go to the next slide, please. Wanted to show you part of my presentation today. We'll be talking about school funding, not to take us on a tangent, and Superintendent DiMaria already referenced this, but we have some funding challenges in our school district, and it certainly permeates things, and I'll show you that a bit. But it's also not an excuse, and I'll show you what we've done to surmount some of those challenges financially. What you see in front of you is an article from the Columbus Dispatch, and this represents the 13-14 school year, and I would say this is our high watermark, if you will. We were one of 7 districts of 49 in Central Ohio to have all A's and B's on the report card, excellent with distinction, and even in 14-15, I think, and also in 15-16, we were designated a school promise by the ODE. So all good things to celebrate, but then finances come into play, and you'll see because there's corollaries. If you go to the next slide, please. So what you're looking at here is, if you've heard about the state funding challenges and what's called the gain cap, if you look in the far left corner, you can see by fiscal year, and what that represents is what's supposed to be our state funding. So in fiscal year 14, we were supposed to receive 14,900,000 and change, and we only received 8.7 million. So we lost 6.1 million. You can follow that all the way down to fiscal year 21, and you can see how short we are in our state funding. If you total that in the last 8 years, that's almost $72 million we've not received in state funding. Reason why I bring that into the presentation is, and I don't have this represented, but I can speak to it, is our class sizes have skyrocketed in terms of the number of students. We've had some decreased offerings because we don't have the money to pay for enough staff. If you go back to when we had our high water mark, we had, in terms of student performance by the state report card, we had kindergarten was 19, 20 students in the class to start. All of our grade levels had no more than 24 students, elementary, high school, maybe as high as 25. That's all been changed. As of last year, our kindergarten classes have 28 students in with 1 teacher and no educational assistants. We need at least 6 teachers just in kindergarten to get back to our ratios where we should be, but that permeates throughout the school district. So we actually are short, and this goes on from the 14-15 school year, about 40 to 45 teachers in the district. And that not only decreases class sizes, but it also would offer some additional courses for kids, especially as we get into the high school. We go to the next slide, please. If you want another representation of this, this is our per pupil expenditure, which means the amount of money we spend per child. I don't recall what the state average is right now. I think it's about $10,700. You can see the corollaries with our state funding problems, our school funding problems, where we're spending, about $8,000 a student. Obviously, we're in an immature year. Well, we finished the year and we're trying to balance everything. I believe our per pupil expenditure will hover right around 8,000, maybe less this year when we finish. We're able to close the books here on the end of this month. So again, our per pupil is decreasing. There are 614 school districts in the state of Ohio. We spend the second least, or the second lowest per pupil expenditure in the entire state. But having said that, we don't make excuses, and we'll go to the next slide. On this slide, you can see what I'll cover here is just an umbrella I'll talk about, and then I'll tap into some of the areas and some of the things we're doing in those areas. I try not to give you a laundry list, but I try to hit some high points. First and foremost, one of the things that permeates our school district is really a study with Glenn Singleton's work on courageous conversations about race. So that has been in place since I've actually been here, and it's something we continue to focus on, and that's our overall umbrella. And then next, we'll just go through different areas. We'll start with human capital, and I'll tell you some of the things that we've been doing there. You can go to the next slide, please. One of the things that we did is, like many school districts, there was a strategic plan in place, predated me, and we actually took a different process, and we started in the 13-14 school year, continued into 14-15 school year. And what we did is we focused more on board goals and objectives. And one of the things that we studied, and I was very proud of our Board of Education, is to start talking about diversity, start talking about, before it was known as DEI, we started talking about some of these things and actually making commitments. And I will tell you on behalf of the board that some of these things were challenging and controversial. Nevertheless, one of the things the board committed to in 2015 is an outright statement in the objectives to say that we will continue to diversify our pool of candidates, and that we're going to look for high quality candidates, but we're also going to look for those who are a different race and ethnicity than the majority in the district. And at that time, the majority was white. We also have had I should say that the board affirmed that in 2015. And when I was hired in 2011, the entire board has not turned over. So there's no one here who was, there's no board members who were here when I was hired. So we brought this back to the board and reaffirmed it in 2019. And I thought that was important because now a new set of board, we all have always lived by this, but I think it was good for them to put their stamp on it. One of the other things we've done in the last couple of years is we also put in all of our job postings that we have an emphasis on diversifying the pool of candidates, reflecting the school district student population. So that's a literal phrase from all of our job postings. We're very open about trying to hire more teachers of color, actually professionals of color. Sometimes there can be overrepresentations of people of color in the non-teaching fields. We haven't had that per se, but we certainly are underrepresented in our teaching ranks and some of our administrative ranks. So we use a lot of different strategies. I just put one in here, but we've been really using a grow your own strategy. We have had a couple paraprofessionals who have come to us who either hadn't finished college or finished with a degree that wasn't really marketable. I believe one was a history major, not education based. So we actually have had a couple people we worked with and been able to get them into the teaching ranks and also our counselor ranks. We're very proud of that. One of the other things when you're trying to diversify your staff is to just be open and talk about that what you're trying to do. Again, some of that's represented in the board objectives and again, in the job postings. But what we made sure that we also do is just openly talk with staff and those who especially are people of color, and we say, do you know, can you refer? So we're very open about that, and that has certainly helped us grow our staff. We have partnerships with College of Education, Career Tech. We obviously are always looking for good candidates, but again, staying with one of our objectives there is continuing to diversify the staff. So this is all open and again, permeates our work. If you go to the next slide, please. One of the things we're really proud of, and this just occurred this year, and we're just getting our foothold on this, obviously because of COVID, but we applied for Diversifying the Education Profession grant. We were fully funded at that. The idea of this grant is to provide, generally, to provide professional learning for all educators related to equity, diversity, and inclusion to improve building climate and culture. So we've started the back half of this year with that. It's a $70,000 grant, and it goes for 2.5 years. Very excited about this and happy that the ODE was able to put that forward for us. And actually published that, and we were able to apply, which was a competitive process. We appreciate that. If you can go to the next slide, please. I'm transitioning now to the second tier leg, if you will, on teaching and learning, just try to hit some high points again here. One of the things when you don't have money is that it really focuses your efforts, I would say, on what is available that within your current purview. So one of the things we're very proud of is our teacher evaluations, and we really do use the teacher evaluations to their truest extent. We spend a lot of time with principal training, teacher training in this. Embedded in those evaluations are assessment data. We obviously follow a competency-based approach. One of the things that we've been doing for years, and it started when I started in the school district, is just living in the subgroup data. It's very easy to do, and especially if you spend some time with the analysis. I can tell you that we've done that in multiple areas. So we looked at, students of color, we'll look at special education. But for example, I remember when I came to the district, we had a passage rate between 30 and 40% for our special education students district-wide when you looked at our state test data. And I just put the show on the road with a couple of our administrators, and we actually went to all the buildings, talked to all the staff about it, and said we have to do better. And again, we've been living in that data, and it really does help us. As well as we then get to the next discussion about diversifying or differentiating our instruction. One of the other things that we're proud of, and we've been doing this for many years, is our teacher-based teams. You heard Steubenville talk about that, and they use the acronym BLTs, or building level teams. So we have those structures in place. We have found that it is very helpful to just present this data to the teachers. We have some very gifted staff, and they actually dig right in on this and offer suggestions. Sometimes it's programmatic, sometimes it's teaching and learning, sometimes or more functioning, the teaching and learning aspect, and then sometimes it's even curricular based. So very proud of that effort. Again, strong focus on the subgroups and then effective teaching practices. Next, we obviously have had PBIS, and we have been pivoting in recent years to include more of a social emotional learning. With the PBIS, again, this doesn't really cost us anything. This is something that's in the environment. So we really focus on tier 1 and what we can do at the classroom level. A lot with positive behavior supports, and again, focusing on that teaming approach. So the BLTs are meeting, the building level teams are meeting monthly. Social emotional learning, something that is always important, and we know the corollaries there with how well students are feeling and what they're bringing to school obviously impacts the learning. And we have had a strong basis there. A little bit later on, I'll talk more about that, because as we start thinking to the future, we have some things that we're going to have a greater focus on SEL. We actually have some programs that we've adopted and will launch next year. I would add, with COVID, I think we can all use SEL anyway, so it's been our focus, but it'll be even a honed focus for the future. If you go to the next slide, please. Some of the strategies and things we've done is we've had some honest dialogue about what are some organizational barriers within the school district, either at the district level, building level, grade levels. And we also have always focused, and we talk about raising expectations for all students. So one of the things, and this is just kind of a task list, but I thought you'd find it interesting, is we looked at our AP eligibility, and way back in 14, 15, we changed that, and basically it's an open door policy now. In the past, we had this rigid or stratified system, and if you didn't meet all the check marks, you weren't able to participate in AP or honors. We've thrown that out actually in the 14-15 school year, and we've started it just to have an open door policy. Anyone can participate in those classes. That does put a greater onus on our guidance counselors, I would say our school counselors, because they have to then spend some time really watching students. And sometimes kids have, a big heart, but we have to look, can they be successful in those classes or not? And then we talk about things, and that might lead us to a discussion about how we can, if they're not at the levels we think that they're going to be need to be successful, what can we do to backfill that? And we might restart, but it starts a dialogue. Similar thing with gifted eligibility, we've loosened that a bit too, and we're seeing greater increase in both those areas, including honors as well, I should say all three, for students of color. Another barrier we had was our math program, and it's not really that fancy, but one of the things we did is started really compacting math in the 14-15 and 15-16 school year. We have found that's been very helpful. And again, it really helps all students, but it helps when you start seeing some of our performance with students of color. These are some of the strategies that have helped us and worked. We worked on a profile of a graduate, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later because we're going to refine that. But we obviously just back mapped and said, what do we want our students to look like when they graduate? From a program of studies option, there have been some long-standing classes, I thought, or courses that we thought would be interesting. So we've had for a long time multicultural literature. We have an African-American histories class and contemporary world issues. We find that students become very engaged in these classes and are very open, and this ends up being a good sharing in all of these classes. A lot of growth for the staff as well. One of the things that we've consistently focused on is trying to improve technological literacy. We know that's important for everyone. And we've also looked at ways that we can not only improve the staff, but the students. Again, not having all the money, sometimes it forces us to do different things. And I'll talk about a little bit more later, we just built a brand new high school, and we were able to work with Facebook and be able to have Facebook provide a grant, and they actually sponsor one of our high school classrooms, and it is a STEAM lab. You heard of Makerspace when Steubenville was talking about, so that's the same. Secondary to that, we also approached Facebook, and they gave us nearly $1 million for Chromebooks. So it was a competitive process. We had to go forward. That's the biggest donation we've ever received in the school district. I should have told you too, if I didn't, the school district is composed of 7 communities. They're the biggest of which is Pataskala, but even interestingly, that the city of Pataskala is divided between 2 school districts. So we have a part, and there's a neighboring school district. But we also have the city of New Albany in our school district, and they've annexed into one of the townships. And because of that, we have a very robust corporate park, and we have a partnership now with Facebook, who has the one and only Ohio data center there, and it's completely in our school district boundaries. Google is here, and 54% of that project is within our school district. And then Amazon is also coming in with an upper echelon type of program they're an offering. So I'll talk more about those later. But if you can go to the next slide. This is the last slide about our teaching and learning. One of the things that we've found it's been very helpful is that we have Columbus Council on World Affairs. So we have a Global Scholars Program, and we've been involved with that Global Scholars. And it's what you expect it would be. It's really just opening students up to a larger view of the world. So, and we're happy to report that we just graduated 2 of our students, the first graduating students from that Global Scholars Program. They actually have that on their diploma. And if you're at least familiar with graduation seals, you can use something like this to also address some of your graduation seal requirements. I have some embedded links in here too, if you're interested. If you want to know more about the Columbus Council on World Affairs, you can click that hyperlink. The next is Career Cafe, and one of the things we found is important is that we need to do more with helping students be directed in their work and what they expect post-high school. So we have been in partnership with the ODE and the our local career tech center, and we had initially piloted one class, an career exploration class in 8th grade. We actually have been funded for a second one. We've been running both of those for years. But it basically is focusing on careers, different career options, and then bring people in from the community. And when we do that, we try to bring representation, and we're open about it. We want some people of color to be in and presenting. Like, for example, AEP is our big electric provider in the Columbus area, Central Ohio. And we've had them come out and present, and there's a group there that deals with Black engineers and all too. So these are good segues or good intersections. Reference the high school ready, very proud of this, even though you would think that we don't have money, which we don't from an operations standpoint, or we're very lean. We have been able to collect some bond monies, and also in a partnership with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, which is the state organization. Our $64 million high school was built with almost $21 million from state monies from the OFCC, so that has certainly been a positive. One of the things that when we built the high school, it's built from a workforce development, college and career ready standpoint. So it's not very linear the way it's built. It's not what you would see in a typical high school. One of the things that we started, and it's nothing we've created, but we certainly have embraced, is we're focused on the 3 E's. So, and we started some of that this year, but weren't able to engage as much, obviously, for COVID, because we were in and out of whether we were virtual, hybrid, or all in. And we were in each of those statuses multiple times throughout the year. But what we have is the 3 E's. So what we're doing is putting every student on a track now, and whether they're going to be enrolled in some type of tertiary or secondary education after high school. That could be culinary arts, it could be a 2-year college. We also have partnerships so that you can earn an associate's degree. Many of our students do, like Steubenville said, which I think is a great program. Or you can matriculate even to a 4-year. Some of what we're looking at now is also employment. And again, when I referenced the New Albany International Business Park, we're actually working, we're just starting some work with Google actually to back map 8 years out for them where they think their workforce need is going to be. And we've literally told them, let's back map that into our high school curriculum. Actually, you could all the way go to middle school if you wanted, and to start to collaborate on those things. So we're happy for that partnership. So that could be the type of situation where students leave our high school with industry credentials and would not have to go to college, or could have an associate's degree with industry credentials. And then the last is enlisting in the service, which we do have some students who'll still do that. So if you can go to the next slide, please. And the third leg here, what I wanted to talk about was some of the things that we've done, in the area of transformation. Certainly talked about culture and empowerment. A lot of these things that we're talking about aren't mutually exclusive to one another, but they certainly, are important, and even with overlaps, I try to partition them off or parse them out the best I could here. If you haven't been involved with it yet, really, when one of the questions was asked about how you deal with staff, we spend a lot of time working on implicit bias. We actually took our entire professional development curriculum, and that was our focus for the 18-19 school year. A lot of that, again, focusing on Glenn Singleton's work, but specifically there's the Harvard Project and implicit bias. So we really have focused on that, and that was very eye-opening for our staff. Under the area of community events, we started about 4 or 5 years ago now an international culture fair. Because of the fast growth of the greater Columbus area, you see more immigrant families coming in. If you looked at our initial data, you see that we have about 15% of our population codes as Asian, and that is by federal definition. But in reality, most of those families are from Bhutan or Nepal. So we have a lot of Bhutanese, Nepalese families moving into the area. So there, it's a way to bring some texture into the culture fair. But we have everything from African American through all of our cultures represented. Certainly have celebrated Black history programs. What we try to do there is just make sure that we're not doing that just in February, that we're trying to keep that through, and that's always a work in progress. One of the things I did this year as a community, and it was a bit of a trust walk, but we tried it, is I actually held a DEI committee, and we had parents and staff involved, and we've done that all year, and we've met monthly. I had that facilitated with one of our consultants, but we did that monthly, and we just finished our last meeting on the 9th of this month. So proud of that, and we'll continue in the future. When you're involved with this work, it's often important to have the student voice represented. So we've had a long-standing multicultural club, and they've been kind of shifting that more to a diversity council to take more leadership role. You can see Diaspora high school program. That's been in place since 2017 or the 16-17 school year. Oftentimes you'll see that with, almost mistakenly, it's put in with people who are Jewish, looking at, how people were spread out in different areas. What our students have done is they've started this program, and I don't want to call it a talent show, but it's more celebratory. And actually, with so much available genealogy now, they actually go out and they look at some of their roots, especially students who are African American, and are able to celebrate. And we've been doing this, like I said, since the spring of 2017. Next slide, please. Because of our, I want to keep harping on this, but because of our financial constraints, we're often looking for grants, and because of our demographics, we can find those, and they're competitive, and we don't get everything, but we often are successful in landing some of the grants. So one of the things that we're proud of, and we started in 2019-20, and it's really been paused because of COVID this year, but we'll bring it back. It's a partnership with the National Center for Rural Education Research Networks. Even though our school district really is composed of a suburban, which is that Franklin County side, and the Licking County side, we're still classified overall as a rural district, just barely. So we were able to get into this project, and it actually is a collaboration with Harvard University, and the Cleveland Browns joined eventually too. And if you ever watch any of the Cleveland Browns monikers, or you'll see "Stay in School," that's what this is. This is part of this project, and it's called Proving Ground. This was a competitive process as well. There were 15 Ohio school districts and 15 New York school districts. We were obviously selected as one of the 15. And this project is really interesting because it's almost solely focused on student attendance. And the work is about how the corollaries are with student attendance and success or performance. So a lot of that is just really digging and living in the data. And we've been doing that. So that's been helpful. Like I said, we've had to kind of pause that this year. But when we did the first year in 2019-20, we did find some interesting trend in that. And we actually changed some of our processes, and we're actually able to improve student attendance, which again has corollaries with performance. This year, and again, this is just kind of the fledgling stage because we're getting our legs under us on this as we get ready for the coming school year. But we're in a partnership with Johns Hopkins University, Ohio State, and then our state support team 11. This is a 3-year partnership to improve student outcomes, but this is more focused on family engagement and looking at those challenges that we have. We have a large immigrant population, like I said, Bhutanese, Nepalese, and then even Somalian, little Ethiopian. And because of that, there's language barriers, different cultural mores. So this grant has been very helpful for us. This coming school year, we actually are going to hire 2 English language learner aides, serving also as parent mentors. So we're excited about that. And it's another part of outreach. We're using our ESSER monies, or those monies, the stimulus monies that have been provided for that. So that's exciting. If you can go to the next slide, please. As we think about strategically where we're moving, we're going to continue our current initiatives. And again, our focus, or a lot of our work is really under the banner umbrella of Courageous Conversations. And we actually have a year-long book study. If you're following any of Glenn Singleton's work, he just recently published a 2nd edition. So we're using that, and there's a facilitator study guide in that too. Put in school funding there because money does make a difference. And, we're hoping that with some changes that are coming down the pike, that we'll be in a much better supported position. Along with that, we have our first DEI position. So we have a central office position that we're launching this year. This is one of or coming year, I should say. It's one of our principals who we promoted to this position. I put in their vision of equity because I kind of referenced this earlier. When I talked about profile of a graduate, we talked when we originally put that together about what we want our students to look like, or what we expect them to look like when they've graduated. Again, focusing on those 3 E's, whether they're enrolled or whether they're going to be employed or enlisted. But we also feel like it's time to update that again, and we're going to go at that from a more equity lens and look at that. When I talked about social emotional learning, and again, I think we could all use this because of COVID, but the thing that we're focused on is actually 2 programs that we're going to launch in the fall. One's Sanford Harmony, and we'll do that in grades pre-K 6. And the other is 7 Mindsets, and that'll be grades 7, 12. There's also a strong DEI aspect within this SEL curriculum, so we're proud about that. We're going to insert those within the curriculum, though. And I kind of referenced, I got ahead of myself there because I talked earlier about the 3 E's and workforce development. But again, just out there trying to leverage relationships, and have had some really good partnerships with some of those in the corporate park. Just so you're aware, as we talk about these partnerships and what we're doing from workforce, we really look at different exit ramps for each of those areas. So for example, or each of those areas, I should say, for example, for education, we have 3 different off-ramps as we're working with students. So our first off-ramp would be if a student's involved with our program and they think they want to be a future educator, if they're on the track that they want to go right into the workforce, we're helping with that through a teaching professions class. That's probably working at a daycare, maybe some form of a leadership. And we also have then a second tier, which is more of an associate's degree track. And there you're for certain looking at, maybe possibly like a leader or director position in private sector. And then the third track within the teaching professions would be matriculating to a 4-year university. It could be Columbus State for a couple of years and then to Ohio State, because we have agreements that way. We have articulation agreements, but we are doing that in multiple areas. A lot of that didn't launch is what we expected with the new high school because of COVID. So. And then if you go to the next slide, I put questions there. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. I know I covered things quickly and tried to cover a lot of ground there in a short period of time, but you can see we're very proud of our work, and again, happy to answer any questions.
Great, Superintendent. Thank you so much. A lot of ground you covered there. So we're going to take a few questions. We are about 8 minutes away from 3 o'clock. And so I'm hoping some of you can linger a little bit longer than 3:30, because I do want to give Beechwood an opportunity to fully present their presentation as well. And yet I know some people may have obligations at 3:30. So feel free to drop off, but we're going to go a little bit long because I want to just give due respect to the preparations, and then I'll make some homework assignments to allow us to process some of this work. I'm going to start the questions with Tracy Mitchell. Tracy, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you, and it was a great presentation. I do have a question about your D&E program. That's very impressive. Did your board work together to build out a DE&I policy so that you will memorialize what needs to be done on a future forward basis?
No, we haven't done that yet. That's part of our summer work. We have a consultant who we're working with from the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. And there's actually a consortium here in Central Ohio. There's about 15 area school districts. So that's part of the work. I wanted that to be more of a ground up approach. The board is very supportive. And I referenced some of the commitments they've made. But I always tell people, board members like parents on steroids, right? They know what they know what they should, and they know what they know. A lot of some personal experience, but we also want to be able to grow their skills and help them. So they're very supportive of this. But we told them we take it at our level and then bring it to the board. So that's part of our summer work.
That makes sense, and thank you. It's very memorialized in body of work.
Thank you.
Great question, Tracy. Merle, you have a question. Go. You're mute, Merle.
Oh, all right. Let me just, I love what you're doing in Licking Heights. I just have to say, I love the year-long focus on implicit bias. I love that you're doing Black History programs outside of February. And I love your emphasis on diverse pool of educators. My question is, have you reached out to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, to try to diversify your pool of educators?
We have. It's not been very successful. It's hard. What we find is it's hard to get people to move to the area for a job that's going to offer maybe $40,000, maybe $46,000 at our pay scale. If you're at a master's degree, and our teacher salaries are a little low, as you would expect. That's part of the reason why our per-pupil expenditure is what it is. What we find is we can find people if they want to come, if they have family in the area or some kind of, but trying to get them to move for less than a $50,000 job, even though the benefits are good, is very difficult. So that's why we focus a lot on grow your own and some things we can do. But I will tell you, it's an area we're constantly vigilant. It is very hard to find people of color in the education field. And we didn't talk a lot about it, but even retaining them, because you have a good teacher, and pretty soon the neighboring school district, they can pay $7,000 more a year is interviewing them. So I would tell you, I didn't put the stats here. I wish we did a better job there, but we're always on trying to do the best we can.
Thank you. And just Paulo, I just feel an obligation to mention that with the great work that Licking Heights and others are doing, if House Bills 322 and 327 become law, a lot of this work would be illegal. So I'm hoping that people who are on the call are doing their due diligence in looking at House Bills 322 and 327, which are sweeping the country, to make sure that we can hold on to this work that's going to help all of our children be successful.
Thanks, Merle, for those comments. LaShawn, go ahead with your question.
Sir, I just wanted to add on to, I submitted the template and information along with that template. And this is a question for Mr. Wagner and the task force in general. As I was trying to find out information about that template, one of the questions that continued to rise, and I would quote this, is why Black? Why are we focused on these practices for Black students? And these were from colleagues, administrators alike. Why is that a need? Mr. Wagner, if you could speak to it, or I'm interested to hear from any of my colleagues also on the call. Thank you.
Superintendent DeMaria, if it's okay, can I start and then?
Please.
Okay. For us, and I guess we have to use the data we have to use. If I look by subgroups, there's a racial achievement gap. You can punch that into Google and see there's a national racial achievement gap. Now, there's some arguments to be made about our testing. Is it culturally fair, and is it testing what it needs to be? But I will tell you, there's a racial achievement gap. We also see gaps. It's not just racial. It's special ed, as I mentioned. I mean, when I started, we had 30 to 40% of the kids proficient. Unacceptable. I remember talking to administrators, and I said, So if you put 10 parents together, 6 or 7 of them are going to know their kids aren't proficient. So those are kind of dialogue we have. I would also tell you women, we focus, we're trying to get more women in areas that aren't traditional, especially in the sciences. But in this case, what I presented to you was the request of the task force. I could go into other areas as well too. I will tell you that from a leadership team standpoint, we have diversified our leadership team. And I actually didn't even think about this, which is good, but I think almost it just tipped over half of our administrators are female now. And again, we have more people of color. We have 3 African-American principals in our school district as well too. But I guess the bottom line for me is looking at gaps that you see between white counterparts and people of color.
Tom, do you want to weigh in on that question?
Yeah,
Tom?
I'll give LaShawn the 30 seconds elevator speech. NAACP was one of the initiators of this conversation. My background, I was a legislator for almost 20 some years. And we went through DeRolf. We went through all of that in legislature. We went through everything you can think of, but it was always looking at it from students' point of view and not from African-American students' point of view. And our goal was to look at, and we looked at every school district, my task force over the last 3 years, and where we saw school districts achieving, we still saw African-American students in the gap. You know, the gap was not closing for African-American students. So that's why picking a school like Steubenville and the other ones, we could see students at all levels achieving and the gap getting smaller and smaller. So that is the purpose of the task force, is for the first time in the history of this state, and maybe the country, to look at education from an African-American perspective. And that's why the practitioners who are giving us testimony are saying, we recognize that being a problem, the academic gap for African-American students, and here's how we are closing the gap. And so that is the 30-second presentation on why, but I'm sure Chairman McWilson and Mrs. Moore and others who have been at this for over 3 years can give you the hour presentation if you really, really want to know.
And this was, and I thank you so much for that. And I guess it disturbed me when I received that question, because I guess it goes back to what Superintendent mentioned about not knowing, you know, what are they supposed to measure if they don't know? And I don't know if the question was they don't know or they didn't want to know, because I heard the question, they was like, they asked why Black students, and I'm wondering, wait a minute, you don't see the same things that I do?
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I missed something. And I can't say it was disturbing, but it made me question. It's like, wait a minute, what don't you see? Thank you.
I will tell you, we don't look at things just monolithically, because I think that would be equally terrible, is to say, okay, look at every kid who fits this demographic, whatever it is, fits this category. But there are some trends. And I would tell you, I know we have limited time and I don't want to cut off Beechwood here, but there's some bias that exists. And, you know, when I started looking at our data, and, you know, generally quiet little white girls were the ones being referred to honors classes more so than everyone other groups of students, and their profile wasn't really different, and sometimes less than some of their counterparts. So those are kind of things we talk about in my district.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And again, I'm going to invite members of the task force to submit additional questions. Superintendent Wagner, thank you so very, very much for your comments.
Thank you.
I will probably follow up a little bit, because I love the fact that you've been reading Courageous Conversations, and would love to know how that's infused your staff culture over the years that you've been doing that, because I think that's a powerful book, and I think it creates that shared understanding of some of these essential concepts. So that'll be one of my follow-ups. But now I'm going to turn to Beechwood City and Bob Hardis and his team. They've been all very, very patient. And again, hopefully some of you can hang around. It's 2 minutes after 3 o'clock. And Bob, why don't you take it away?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, first of all, and we are honored to have been invited to present. We are going to, in a moment, my colleague next to me, Kevin Houchins, is going to take over the screen and put up our slides. And what I can tell you while we're waiting to get that up there is just the first thing you're going to see is a meeting number with something called Slido. And so for any of you that are interested, you can go on to the internet on your phones or on your laptops in front of you to Slido, SLIDO.com. We'll give you a meeting number. And what you can do is go into the audience Q&A, which is should be available right there. And just as we present, type in questions or comments there. Please make sure to put your email in it so that if we do run out of time today, and you can see Kevin's presenting now. Maybe if it's not, you can share our presentation with Carolyn Jones.
Okay.
Looks like
your screen's up. So if
yeah, you're on there. Can you bring up the let's see, give it a second here. Maybe it'll show up on there. So as we go, if you type into the Q&A any questions, leave us your email. Even if we run out of time today, we will be able to get back to you after the presentation. So let me start by saying this. All right, we're hoping it'll show up now. There we go. And is the meeting number on there?
Yep, it should pop up in a second. And there we go.
Okay, there we go. So when you get to slido.com, type in those 6 digits, 6 numbers, and you'll be just essentially brought to a chat room, but it'll be left in our hands and we'll be able to get back to you. We in Beechwood, we're proud of our efforts, but to be very honest, we don't feel that we have a lot to brag about. Today, we're going to speak to areas where we've made a lot of effort and hope that what we're seeing is correlated progress because of that. I have 3 highly valued colleagues with me. One is online and 2 are sitting in the room with me. They will be presenting as we go, and albeit very briefly for each of us, on areas that they've taken a lead in our district. Linda Logalbo is logged in remotely. She is the Beechwood's Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Kevin Houchins to my left is our Director of Equity and Community Engagement. And Dr. Ken Vion is Beechwood's Assistant Superintendent. In our district, we have maintained a focus on 3 areas for several years now. And we've tried as best we can to align our resources, our programming, and our professional development to them. And those 3 areas are student achievement, intercultural awareness, and mental health. We recognize, I'm sure all of you are probably thinking, well, those are huge, overarching areas. Yes, they are. We also, every day and every year that we've been focused on them, find how overlapping those areas are and also intersecting. And so what we find is progress in one leads to progress in the others. We're trying to get better about recognizing those areas of overlap and plan around them strategically so we can avoid planning for them in silos. Today, we're going to present briefly about 5 initiatives where we have made changes to district practices and or developed new programs and dedicated our resources. We're going to talk about our professional development for both our administrators very specifically, but also our staff more widely across the district. We're going to talk about formative assessment, access for students to accelerated and gifted programming, our hiring practices, and lastly, our efforts around community engagement. I'm going to turn things over to Kevin Houchins regarding professional development first. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So the first thing you're going to see is I got a slide up from our professional development, which we are very fortunate to have a world-renowned expert on implicit bias in Jennifer Everhart, who was a class of 1984 graduate of Beechwood High School. She's also working at Stanford University. And everyone, you know, she's been on from Oprah to CNN. They're always utilizing her. But what a great fortune for us to have one of our graduates who actually came back in, and she visited our school. We had her come in 3 times to visit our school to work with not only our teachers and our students and our administration, but we also had time for her to come in and work with our parents. In addition, we had a meeting in which she actually worked with both our administration and our local government. All these things are very important in terms of making systemic changes to our district. And it was important that everyone in our entire community be a part of the changes that we wanted to make here in Beechwood at the high school and all of our schools in the district. One of the other things we did, and I'm going to be fairly brief because I know time is going to be short for everybody. I don't want to extend things too much. So I'll talk about another program we use, which is called Point-Made Learning. Point-Made Learning was another one of our professional developments, and we took our entire staff, and I mean our entire staff, whether it be a custodial person or a teacher or administrator or a bus driver, it didn't matter who it was. We took our entire program through this training because it is very important for them to understand how to interact with difference. And that was one of the focal points of all the work that we did, was trying to get people to understand what they bring to the table from their own bias and what issues are presented when they have to deal with people that are different. The Point-Made Learning software, the program we use with Point-Made Learning, it focuses on a group of New York teenagers who come together, as 16 of them. It's available online. I highly recommend utilizing it. And these young people come together from all different walks of life from the different boroughs in New York City. And they learn about how they interact with each other, and they learn about their similarities and their differences and their struggles. It's a great program, and I highly recommend any school district to use it. One of the other things we had our staff go through, our administrators go through, was the REI groundwater training. And this was really eye-opening for all of us, and I say all of us because I'm included in this, because it helped us identify the difference between things that we need to do in terms of individually programming for our kids, but how do we make systemic changes? One of the things that we did as a district that I'm very proud of was the fact that when everyone was making their statements last year after the George Floyd murder, everyone was talking about what they were going to do, but we're already ahead of the game in terms of what we were already doing. But one of the statements in there is that we challenged our staff, everyone in our district, our boards challenged them to dismantle systemic racism. And they made it a priority for not just the administration, but for every employee in the district. And so we kind of charge everyone here with that responsibility of, when you see it, say something, and we need to make the systemic changes that are necessary to get our district going in the appropriate direction so that all people feel like they belong and they're seen, heard, and valued in our district. This was followed by some training that I personally created called The Power of Silence. And it really works upon how silence can be good, how it can be bad, and how you use it to benefit an organization. And so that was it was a really eye-opening presentation that we did together as an administrative team. And it's something that we're going to take to the rest of our staff this coming school year because of the impact that it had on our administrative team. And then just a brief statement about it was that what we wound up doing is we wound up talking about how to respect each other and how we can make ourselves better as an organization by respecting, letting silence have a turn. So instead of over talking each other and everyone wanting to be in control, we wanted to allow people to have a turn, and everyone gets a turn to speak. And that's sometimes a challenge when you're dealing with a lot of people who are used to being in control. So that's just a brief part of it. You have to buy my book later. No, I'm just kidding. All right, next we're going to turn it over to Linda Legabo. She's going to talk about some of the other work we've done.
Thanks, Kevin. Next slide. Perfect. This past summer, we delved into some book studies for our staff. These were voluntary, and all staff members participated, from custodians to bus drivers to classroom teachers to secretaries. And we gave them a choice. We're really big in the idea that people are at different places on this learning continuum of how to meet the needs for our students. And so these are some of the titles that we offered last summer for, again, for our staff members to do a voluntary book club. And we had a great turnout. I think we had about 100 staff members participate in these book clubs this past summer. And the staff also led these, they were staff led. So the administrators kind of took a step back and allowed the staff to decide what books they wanted to study, gathered them and organized them into like staff members, and got some positive dialogue in the summer, even before school started. When school started, we wanted to be focused and intentional with developing culturally relevant classrooms. So Kevin and I worked with our English language arts department, and we examined and did an audit of our curriculum. We based this work in Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop out of Ohio State University. Her famous quote is that we want books to be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors for our student population. And so we went to all of our teachers, K through 12, that are teaching English language arts, and asked them to take a serious look at their curriculum to see if our curriculum were windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So we examined for a whole variety of things: gender, race, family structure, differing abilities, socioeconomic status. And as I would say, it was the second or third meeting that we had with our teachers as we did this year-long study, they were starting to self-identify, oh, this is where we have gaps. We don't have very many positive female characters. We don't have enough Asian characters. When we're representing African-American characters, are they represented in a positive light, or is there always a history of oppression, slavery, or criminal action associated with those characters? So we had a lot of very good discussions, and now this summer our staff are working on bringing in new titles to diversify curriculum. Next year, we're going to do the same process with social studies. So again, we'll work with all the teachers K through 12 that are teaching social studies. We'll take a look at our curriculum and our state standards and look for opportunities to bring in diverse resources and text to support that curriculum. So we're very passionate about having students see themselves in our curriculum. And by going subject area by subject area and being deliberate through it, we're hoping that we can become better at providing that for our students.
All right, I gotta go.
So next slide.
Yep. Thank you. So one of the things that we've been doing for professional development also over the last, I think 5 years, is talking about the formative assessment process. And so we wanted to develop a common understanding with our teachers to implement this process, and help them realize formative assessment isn't just a thumbs up, thumbs down assessment, but it's a process. So we wanted teachers to know that they had to collect data in a variety of methods, and then we wanted them to analyze, and I'm just giving a quick overview of this. We wanted them to analyze the data, and then we wanted them to provide feedback that's written, oral, but very descriptive, so students know exactly what that feedback means. And then we wanted to adjust the students' learning. So the question is there an opportunity for enrichment, clarification? Do we need to explain something differently? And some students just need a little more time on task. And so we tried to develop this process so students, so we know exactly where students are in their learning. We learned that students may be accelerated beyond the level of what's being assessed, and that some students may not have the prerequisite information as we go through these short processes to do check-ins with students. So we wanted to get to know our students academically on an individual basis. So through this process, we've been able to better identify where students are in their learning learning continuum, adjust instruction accordingly, and to meet the needs of each student. But then to take it to the next level, now helping students of color, developing culturally responsive practices in the classroom is going to be the next step that'll build upon our formative assessment process.
So one of the other things instructionally that we've been looking at for several years now is this access to accelerated and gifted classes. Very similar. One of the things we took a look at is we used to use a verbal-based assessment to determine superior cognitive gifted. We changed to the Naglieri nonverbal assessment, the NAT, for gifted identification. The Naglieri is have said or is recommended for reducing bias in terms of students that have access to good instruction before school or having those strong verbal skills. So we made that change about 5 years ago. We also applied the gifted cluster service model in lieu of a self-contained gifted classroom program. We used to have it in grades 4 and 5, and now we moved to the cluster model. So not only can we serve the gifted students with this high level of instruction, we can also place other kids in the cluster classroom. And we're very deliberate about what students we choose to put in the cluster classrooms. And finally, the creation of enrichment and acceleration programs in math has been a long-going practice for us. We start acceleration or compacting the curriculum in grade 4, but what we've done is created multiple entry points in a variety of grade levels. We recognize some students are ready at different times. So we can't determine who gets to go to BC Calculus by their 3rd grade Iowa scores or the performance. So because of that, we've created this multiple entry point system where students can enter into the accelerated program at variety grade levels. The first opportunity is 3rd grade. We have another opportunity in 4th and 5th grade, in 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade. With this acceleration, we also know that students need support to get there. So we've created some summer bridge programs for the students to make up some content to support the students so that they can access the accelerated curriculum. In terms of numbers wise, over 50, close to 60% of our middle school students are in some kind of form of an accelerated math, science, or English language arts class. Because of all this work we've been doing at the early elementary grades, with a particular focus on students of color, to have our classrooms that are advanced and accelerated mirror our student population, in having those students of color have opportunities to participate in summer bridge programs that allow them support so that they can access the curriculum in these honors and accelerated classes. We're very proud of that work, and we continue to improve and do that work.
So one of the things, and I heard Dr. Wagner talk about hiring, people from underrepresented groups also, and we've had this as a focus area for several years, and so we've recognized that the diversity of our staff doesn't reflect the diversity of our students in the classroom. We've acknowledged that it's not always easy to recruit people of color, but we do have students in our classroom that look like the United Nations, and so we've made a conscious effort to diversify our staff. And so I just wanted to talk about a few things that we've done. To start, we're advertising more. Years ago, we had the mentality of people will come to us if they want to work in Beechwood, and we realized that wasn't diversifying our staff. So we advertise in different places, HBCUs. We share postings with Cleveland State's University of College and Urban Affairs, social media sites, LinkedIn, Twitter. We use Handshake, which shares the postings with colleges in Ohio and the US, actually. We share our postings with staff and hoping that our staff are able to share. And then we have a Grow Your Own program with Ursuline College also. So the more we can get the word out about the postings, the wider net will have more staff from underrepresented groups. So then going into the interview process, we've added consistent questions, and that way we feel that'll help reduce bias, especially when we have internal candidates. So it's sort of, it's easy to hire an internal person, but continuing to hire the substitute teacher that's always around or the tutor isn't going to help diversify our staff. And just because people are comfortable with them, and it's easy to be comfortable, but we've pushed, so there's a little discomfort at times. The process, the process that we have helps us find the best candidate. Has included a number of staff members from representative groups. So that the questions on our application, actually, we revolve around cultural competency, work ethic, relationships. These are essential skills that we value in the district. During our interview process, we include other staff, not just admin, in the second round, to bring different perspectives to the table to help reduce or eliminate bias as much as possible and ensure that we're finding the best candidate. It's much easier if I just went into the interview, I interview people, I make a choice and move on. That's the easy route. But to find the best candidate, we need a variety of perspectives in that process. We want to hear their opinions, gain insight to what people hear, and in the questions or answers. So the perspectives of the staff members included in the second round, we pick a variety of staff members. It could be, because of their race, religion, they're part of a LGBTQ community, content knowledge experts, they're a veteran teacher, or they went through the process. They're a new hire in the past few years. So we do value their perspectives that they bring. And it's worked out really, really well for us in our hiring process. And then talking about our questions that we use in the interview process, again, hopefully to reduce or eliminate bias, we developed them with 5 areas in mind. You can see them on the screen. All of our questions revolve around work ethic, relationships, cultural competence, instructional knowledge, and content knowledge. These are things that we feel are really important. And then all the questions help us rate the candidate to find the best person. And I could share more and more, but I'm going to, talking about attracting, hiring, retaining staff. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Houchins about retaining staff after we get them in the door.
Thanks, Ken. One of the things that's really important is that, it's not enough that you actually get them in. You got to keep them. And as we've been working really hard, in particular over the last few years, particularly had quite a deal of success last year. I think we had 7 of the 8 hires. We don't have a lot because we're a small district, but 7 of the 8 hires we had from last year were from underrepresented groups. And that's something that we're proud of. But the thing is that we got to keep them. And so part of what we've been doing is a lot of effort has been put into staff retention. One of the efforts that we do is that we make sure they have access to central office administrators. So myself, and personally, I meet with all of our new hires once a month, talk about what's going well, what's not, things I can help them with. This has proved to be really beneficial for us to get feedback in terms of our onboarding process and just different things that they find out throughout the school year. One of the things that happens with a lot of schools is that they talk early, but not later. And a lot of times when you talk to people, they don't know what they don't know. So you got to kind of give them an opportunity to really get an understanding, get a grasp of the organization before you actually start asking them the right questions. And again, before the end of this school year, I made sure that I met with each one of them, and they gave me a lot of specific things that they want to do in terms of their growth and development, which is awesome. Because not only do we want to maximize them and have them bring their full self to our district, and we want to help them achieve the goals that they have, whether that be in administration, department chair, whatever it may be. We're trying to help our staff go there, and that was something Ken talked about in terms of our Grow Your Own program too. The other thing we're doing is actually bring a picture is we have an African-American teacher affinity group. And this particular group, this is just some of our teachers. We met together and we cooked a meal because one of our African-American teachers is actually over our culinary arts program and the Excel Tech program. And so it was a really great time for us to kind of connect together. They talk about breaking bread, but even better than that was the fact that we actually made the meal together. So that added an extra level of connectedness for us as a group. And that has been followed up with, it's been a little bit more difficult because of COVID, but I will tell you that that group, we have met a few times virtually. And this year, now that things are opening back up, I'm looking forward to having them meet together regularly once a month for our regular meetings in which we can discuss issues that may impact our African American staff and their retention. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is like my favorite thing, and it's the fun part of my job, and that's community engagement. So first of all, it's really important to know that Beechwood took the effort to actually create a position for someone like me as a director of equity and community engagement. That was a very important step for them in terms of making the commitment level to having someone at an administrative level, at central office level, that had the ability to hold the district accountable. And that's a big deal. Like, a lot of people talk about doing this work, but they don't want to actually be held accountable. And that's one of the things that they have given me the freedom to do in creating the position. One of the things they did was make sure that I don't have a lot of layers. So the person that I answer directly to is the superintendent. I don't have to answer to a lot of different people who may cause me to not be able to operate within the district the way I need to. So creating this position was one of the other things I would tell you that was really important. And the community engagement piece of it is something that I really thrive on personally, and I really love. So let's talk about it. So one of the first things I created when I got hired to this position was I created this community equity and engagement teams. And it was very important because in Beechwood, each of our buildings has a different personality and they have different needs. So we didn't just create one team and just say, okay, it's okay to just do this. We said, no, we want to create an equity engagement team, and it got all the players together. So we created an equity engagement team for teachers, one for parents, and then another one for students. The only place we don't have one of the equity teams in place is in our K-2 building or our preschool. Not quite sure if they would be able to contribute to that. But I will tell you, and just being honest and transparent, which I like to be, is the fact that the Hilltop building, which is our 3 to 5 building, initially we weren't going to have an equity team there. But I will tell you that when Dr. Eberhardt visited, and myself too, she actually used these kids because they were so bright and had so much and so understood what they wanted to see in their classrooms and what they wanted to see in their education. And it was beautiful. And you'll get to see that in a few minutes. I'll show you a picture. But at the end of the day, we also use these equity engagement teams to help us make a lot of decisions. For example, everyone was worried about COVID and what we were going to do. We kind of were ahead of the game with a lot of people because we used these teams to give us feedback on what they wanted. So we have far less complaints than I think we would have had we not involved all of our stakeholders in the process. So we had them meet with doctors and people from the Cuyahoga County Board of Health to help us make the appropriate decisions for Beechwood and each building. And that was one of the things that was important because we didn't do the same thing in each of the across the district. We had different things to meet the needs of different levels of our students and our families' needs for during this COVID time. In addition, one of the projects we're working on right now is we're working on this community standard of free speech. And this team, we're putting together some of the things you see at the bottom with this district equity team. And we're including a lot of different people from a lot of different places, such as, counselors, building administrators, secretaries. We're bringing all the players into the table so that we can talk about how we want to address free speech in Beechwood as a community and what is acceptable and what is not. And so that's one of the challenges, is to make sure that, because we do have, Beechwood is one of the things we always talk about as being diverse. And that is also not, sometimes you have a difficulty coming to a shared meaning of what is respect. And so this community standard of free speech is what we want to talk about as a district. We want to create so that everyone feels as though I was a part of it, I created it, and I will accept it when someone calls me on it. And this is not something we want to talk about just for the classroom. It's also for the interaction of our staff members, administrators, and also for fans. When people come to our community to come to an event, whether it be a sporting event or one of our concerts, or maybe a play, we want to make sure that everyone understands in Beechwood, this is what is acceptable, and it can hold down, reduce conflict. So this is the part y'all been looking at all these words and numbers and all data and everything like that, but you want to see people and you want to see the work. At least that's what I wanted to see. So I put it in the presentation. So what you'll see here is actually our students are the student equity engagement team from Hilltop. And most of these kids are in the 5th grade, or were in the 5th grade when this picture was taken. They're meeting with Dr. Everhart and their principal, and they're discussing their issues and getting their points across about what they think equity looks like in the schools. And then other picture to the right, you'll see this is the student equity engagement team from the high school. And they're also meeting with Dr. Everhart. Now the students, and then you'll see the young lady seated to the right of Dr. Everhart. She actually spearheaded our movement last year, in which we did something that no one else, we didn't see a lot of people doing, is we had a rally for educational equity in which our students led. And this high school student there sitting next to Dr. Everhart, she was one of the students who spearheaded this movement. And we had a crowd of families come in to our stadium. We did social distancing, and our students told our community what they wanted from education. Now, cool part was they did such a great job. We actually brought them back in for our convocation this year and let them tell our teachers what they want. And they told their stories about what education has been like for them as minority students in our district. And it really pulled at the hearts of some of our teachers. And it also struck some chords that weren't so good, because people were like, man, I thought I was doing a great job. What else do I do? Cool part was we were there to meet with them. We took these equity engagement team, and one of the teams you'll see here is like our teacher equity engagement team. We took that teacher equity engagement team and took them through the point-made learning and had some meaningful conversations about how they could address systemic issues and their own bias in their classrooms in order to make this opportunity better for all of our kids. To the left, you'll see our parent equity engagement team from one of our buildings. This is Brighton. You'll see that this is a very diverse group of parents. We have parents who represent everything, low socioeconomic. One of the parents is African. We have a parent, a Jewish, Orthodox Jewish parent. We have people from the LGBTQ community on it. So this is as diverse a group of families as we can get, and we have them across the board. And that way, that representation that everybody wants is there in place for everyone. Next, you'll see one of the other things that's super fun is the student engagement part of what I really love to do. And I heard you all ask questions, and I'm actually pretty pleased to show you some of these slides here. And what you'll see, one is a picture of our Max Scholars at graduation. And we took the Max Scholars program. We started with about 5 kids. And the last year before COVID, it was a total of around 75 to 80 kids who attended Max Scholars on a regular basis. And in a few minutes, I'll show you some of the things that we did with Max Scholars. But one of the bigger things we did to Max Scholars is we had the advisor for National Honor Society come in and talk to them about being members of National Honor Society. And what you see here is one of our African-American athletes for Beechwood, who actually was a recipient of, who was inducted into the National Honor Society this school year. And that was a big, huge place, because you'll see the kids here, and when people think of Beechwood, they think of high achieving, but we also have a gap. And one of the ways we've been improving that gap is trying to have our kids more understanding about access to higher education classes, which Linda talked about a few minutes ago. Next, you'll see this is one of the aspects that we have done is that we've taken the kids on trips. So our Max Scholars, we take them so they can engage and feel proud of themselves. So what you'll see here is one of the aspects of we take this yearly trip where we visit a museum or a couple of museums, and we also go to visit HBCUs. And the other picture to the right, and actually going to the left, is in front of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. on our D.C. trip. And we had a group of kids that we took. We had a wonderful time there. Over that weekend, we visited the museum. We also went to see, at that time, Black Panther came out. We went to that movie. We went to visit 3 HBCUs. We went to Morgan State. We went to Coppin State, and we went to Howard. And as a result, it has been very beneficial for our kids to be on college campus and to change their aspirations. And one of the things for Beechwood kids in particular was to, experience the African diaspora in terms of how they wanted to go to school. And it was important for them. They found this important once they started visiting these colleges. So the other thing you'll see is our young ladies, they went to an event here in Cleveland sponsored by Tri-C that's called Black Diamonds. And it's a female empowerment group, day in which they bring some really great speakers in But it also, one of the extra benefits is that it gave our young ladies an opportunity to connect just as young women, as opposed to having the guys there. And we're also looking for this year, we're looking forward to having some better, more opportunities for our guys. But we have also taken our young men to the African American Male Summit at University of Akron. That's been another way we've engaged our students. The next thing you'll see here is us visiting, in addition to our DC trip, another year we went to visit Tennessee. And that year we went to the Muhammad Ali Museum on that trip in Louisville, Kentucky. And we went to the Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati also during that trip. And we visited Tennessee State, Fisk, and Meharry while we were in Nashville, Tennessee. You'll see our students there. You'll notice that the group is growing. That was a part of the process. Now, I hold these kids accountable. They had to help fundraise, and they also had to have attendance and participation in Max Scholars activities and discipline issues and stuff like that. This is a positive benefit for us all the way around because our kids really saw the benefit. And what transpired, the year we visited Tennessee State, we had 11 students go to an HBCU that year. And now one of the things I haven't talked about, which I'm really, really proud of, is the fact that, and I thought I had a slide for that, but I didn't include it, was the fact that a lot of our kids have received full scholarships to HBCUs. A lot of their merit-based scholarships for kids from Beechwood, they should be able to meet those numbers. And that's one of the things I've been pushing on our kids. Now, one of the better benefits out of that whole thing is getting that full scholarship is it changes economics for their family. Because now their kids won't have to worry about having money to go to school, because when they come out of college, they're not going to be in debt. And we've had kids go to Tennessee State. We have kids to go to Howard. We have kids at Shaw. We have kids at North Carolina A&T, Alabama State. We have them all over the country. FAMU, they're everywhere. And I believe this is in part due to our efforts in trying to expose our students to HBCUs. That's been a large part of our success in the program. And so that is one of the last things I'll get to, is one of our final steps that we've been in recently. And that is our banner project. And you'll see here, these are banners that we have up at each of our buildings. I think it's roughly 70 or 75 buildings, 75 banners up throughout the entire district. And we feature, these are the banners from our Black History Month, which was the first month we kicked them off. And it has been so beneficial for our entire community in that people have seen, looked at the banners and say, I didn't know this person, who is this person? And then they go home and research it. And then on top of that, we had our classroom teachers start using the people who appeared on the banners to connect kids in the classroom. And not only do we do it for, each month is different. So last month was Asian American Heritage Month. This month is our Hometown Heroes, in which we have pictures of our students and local community leaders. This month we've had Arab American Month. We had Women's History Month. And it has become a sense of pride for everyone in our community based on the work that we've done, because it's a visual representation of who we are as a district, as we are diverse, and we want everyone to know it when they come visit our schools. So whether you're there for a sporting event or whatever it may be, we want everyone to know who we are as a Beechwood City Schools. I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anything, because one of the other things that's really cool is that we also we have some nice partnership. In addition to the partnership with Ursuline College, we also partner with one of our local temples. And we're having like a cultural exchange program in which the group of kids from our Max Scholars are meeting with a group of kids, a teen group from the temple, and they are learning about each other's culture. And this is helping us in terms of learning about difference in how we interact with each other. This group, we're also planning to take, and again, these kids from the temple, we're doing a cultural exchange. So we're going to take them on our trip so they can learn about HBCUs and about African-American history too. So, and then we'll go and visit some of their cultural things too. So like our first trip is planned to be Washington, D.C. Because of the Holocaust Museum and some of the other items that we'll be able to share in this trip. But then we also plan on having a big trip in which we plan on going to Selma. And the student participation in these activities is really significant, and it is making a difference in our kids and how they connect and how they see each other. But I will tell you, and this is the last thing, one of the last things I want to highlight is the work that we have done with this one group I call Be Seen. That's the Student Equity Engagement Network. It's a group of students who represent all different walks of life, whether it be some kids may be LGBTQ, Pakistani, Indian. I mean, just anything you can think of. This is a group of kids with African American females, there's white females, there's everyone in there. There's Jewish kids, there's Muslim kids, there's everything. And this group came together and they bonded and they did an amazing job of helping each other find the understanding of what they had in different, but the thing they were surprised by was how much they had in common. And that some of the same issues they had, especially some of our Pakistani girls, they were sharing with some of our Black girls that colorism is an issue with them too. And so the challenges that they all faced was really, it was great to be involved in this. And this group was very instrumental in pushing me and helping them get in front of our parents. We've been looking for a way for our kids to engage our parents. And these young ladies wound up saying, Ms. Houches, we want to talk to our parents and let them know what we really want in engagement. I mean, from our school district in terms of education. And so that worked out really well. That has been amazing. I'll really touch on really quick couple other things. We've also engaged with our alumni, using our illustrious alumni to support our recent grads and taking them along. So recently we had one of our grads is a comedian. His name is David Arnold. Go see him. He's really funny. He's also on Netflix. He connected one of our recent grads from Ohio State, and he had him move to Los Angeles, and he is currently working for him at Nickelodeon. And he is, and what we were doing is we're trying to build those connections to help our kids along their career. And what David said to us was that it took him 20 years to get to the point where he was. He said for the young man that he just took in, it will hopefully just take him 5, because he was going to be that branch to help him get into, a successful career. And then finally, one of the things, and I didn't have a picture here, but I wish I did, is the last thing is our new student group. Really proud of that. Our new student group is for all our new students, because when they come into Beechwood, there's different things, and we don't assume that every kid knows everything about Beechwood, whether it be technology or just how our classes operate, because we have some weird schedules sometimes. And we introduce Beechwood to them. We start off by teaching them the technology to make sure that they can operate all the technology things that their teachers expect them to be able to operate. And then each month we have a different each week, we have a different department come in. So one week it'll be the English department, next week it'll be the social studies department, and they offer individual time with the teachers for them to tutor our kids, our new students, and help them catch up or help them understand anything that they need, any types of help they need. Now, one of the additional benefits of this is we also recruited our National Honor Society students to participate, and they also offer us tutors for our new students, so we help engage them as they come into our district. So I am wrapped up. I know I said a lot, but we want to open up the opportunity. I know we had a lot of questions. Thank you all for using Slido. We've been answering as many questions as we could along the way. Let's see what else we have in here for us.
Great. Let's take a couple questions then. Tom, you want to get us started?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. And if you ever need a speaker for the African American Teacher Affinity Group, I'm available and hungry and I'll be there. But the question about Jennifer Eberhardt, could you share with us, not right now, but at some point, I know you have a book, because most of the books you mentioned are on my bookshelf, but her book is a good one. But maybe an article or two that the group can read. Part of our assignment and work is to read some articles. If you have an article too by Jennifer Eberhardt that you think this group needs to read, would you share that with Paulo so we can read it?
Yeah, that would be great. And I'll share it out.
That's all.
Let's ask a couple more questions of Beechwood. Please raise your hands.
So I see one of the questions here while we're waiting is how long has the equity position been in the district? It's been here for 2 years.
Say it again. Did you say 4 years?
2.
2 years. 2 years. Excellent. Gemma McWilson, go ahead. Gemma, I can't hear you.
Yeah, this is Gemma. My question is, what is your per pupil operating budget on an annual basis?
16,000.
And based on that, your median income in Beechwood is what, around 100,000?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember the last time I saw that.
I think it was less.
Yeah, I think it's slightly less than that, like maybe around 90, 95,000, but you're real close.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that question, and there are two questions. The first one is this reason. One of the things that we're looking at is the issue of socioeconomic status, per pupil operating costs, how much is actually spent in the classroom itself, how much is actually spent outside of the classroom. And the definition of some of which you have covered are those expansive things which kids sometimes don't necessarily, all of them don't have access to. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with your students, specifically African-American students, how many of them do you think enjoy the extracurricular activities and the extracurricular things within the community that would help them achieve at an even higher level?
Boy, that's a tough question, and also to boil it down. So I mean, I'll throw out, and any of my colleagues can disagree with me. I'll say 8 out of 10, and I don't really know what I mean by that, except to say that I think we see a high participation in all sorts of extracurricular activities in Beechwood, including some of the things, for example, that Mr. Houchin spoke about, like the Max Scholars and the trips, et cetera.
Right.
There are definite. So while we have that, I would say that some of our widest socioeconomic divides exist within our African American student population. So some of our, I guess I would say what I see, and I've seen over the years, a dynamic within our Black student and Black family population is that that while many have been in Beechwood for a long time, and the parents are white collar professionals, and there are some very distinct, for example, achievement gaps that we see with that population that are pretty damning of our school system. We also see that some of our, that another percentage of our African American families tend to be, to have moved into Beechwood as the students are older. And so we see, very distinct issues that we have to adjust for as a school system to, say, new high schoolers and sometimes new middle schoolers who are African American. Right. And the socioeconomics of that are prevalent as well. So often we'll see that perhaps a family that does not have the means of, let's say, the more typical, whatever that is, typical Beechwood family, has moved here sometime in middle or high school. And so we will then be presented with, families that have an issue with funding some of the experiences that other students may take for granted in Beechwood. And so we try to find a way then to utilize funds from, say, our PTO or our own school budget to ensure that there's equity and participation. And and we try to do that in a way that doesn't violate the family's dignity as well.
Right. I asked that question because of Beechwood's higher socioeconomic status, some at the lower area use socioeconomics as a reason they can't enrich, enhance, accelerate through compensatory mechanisms of the type that you are speaking of. So when you see all the enrichment things that he was speaking of, which under normal circumstances, all kids may not have access to, a lot of people are not looking at the intra racial economic dynamics within the African American community. And I thought Beechwood has a very clear set of those particulars. And I'm glad you were able to articulate it, because I think it will help people at the lower level that get more money per student, and yet they do not provide those enhancements, enrichments, and accelerations in order to compensate for the various things that you do as a normal.
Great observation there, Jim. I appreciate it. Ship, you have a question?
Yes, sir, I did. I had a question and statement to Kevin. Great job. Great job explaining that and articulating. The position has been in place for 2 years. How did that make you feel? And did your school district come at you to fill that position? Again, from grow your own and being in the school district and creating that district, or excuse me, creating that position for you to help along with the journey. How did that make you feel? I'm just curious. Not to mention your principal sitting right next, or superintendent sitting right next to you. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, fortunately for me, I've always been active, you know, in the district. And so I had a relationship. I kind of had an interesting job, because part of my job was in the building. Part of it was doing work video wise for the district. So it enabled me to have and this was, again, kind of going back to the theory behind why African-American staff members need to have access to central office staff. Yes. I did, and it helped the transition for me. It helped me be able to show them, and they could see the kind of person I was, and the work that I was doing with kids, to identify that I was the person for this particular position. At least I think that's the case. In addition, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, a great deal of responsibility for this also was we have one of our parent groups. One of our parents group was very instrumental in making sure and requesting from and meeting with and working with Dr. Vion and Dr. Hardis in establishing the needs of the African American community. And one of them was this particular position. And I was just very fortunate that, well, I'm gonna say two things. I was fortunate and I was smart enough to be prepared. You know, I think that was one of the bigger things for me, was that I prepared myself in terms of going back to school, which is not always easy when you got a family and other things going on. But I put myself in a position where I could receive that opportunity. And I think for me, that is one of the things I try to emphasize to other people, is you never know when opportunity is going to come, but you have to put yourself in a position to get it. And for me, I was very happy that the work that they recognize how hard I work as a person, and my commitment to equity, which has always been this way in this district. And I was just very happy that they saw that in me. And so I feel like the best thing I can tell you is that when I work in this district and the work that I do, I'm walking in my purpose for life. And I know that every day. And so I don't know what else I could say in terms of making it seem like it was better.
Great. That's a
know you
fantastic
walk with your purpose.
Yep. Well done, and hats off to Beechwood for putting their money where their mouth is.
And it really comes out in your passion for the work. All right, we are about a half hour over, so I really appreciate your patience and indulgence. I want to thank again all three districts, Beechwood and Licking Heights and Steubenville. Again, thanks to the Beechwood team for the excellent presentation. We will collect the PowerPoint slides and make sure those are distributed to members. So, a couple of things. We did not have a chance to process what we heard today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Google Doc that's something like what I heard today. And I may take some liberties in terms of some major categories or something like that, but then ask each of you task force members to reflect on some of your key takeaways based on the conversations that you heard today, because we have to begin processing what we heard and synthesizing it in a way that allows us to talk about how do we frame the different kinds of actions that we've heard about. How do we coalesce around what best academic practice models look like, and that part of the work. So look for a link to a Google Doc that is going to have a little bit of structure to it, but otherwise we'll ask you to reflect on what you heard. The other thing is that our next meeting is July 16th. 12:30 to 3 o'clock. Again, I look forward to having probably at least one, maybe two additional school presentations, and then maybe beginning to bring in some, some national players who have done some work in this area as well. Again, to continually inform our synthesis and our thoughts about this framing. I'll also, as you saw between our last meeting and this one, I sent out a couple emails, as Tom Roberts mentioned, with some reading material. We may be ready to put some subcommittees together, so we'll ask for your feedback about that. And again, in the interest of continuing to move the work forward and leverage the great expertise that is here around the table. Are there any questions or final comments before we end the meeting? If not, I just want to say one more time, thank you for your support. Thank you for indulging this meeting today. Keep up the great work you do each and every day, and we look forward to our continued journey forward. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend.
All right. Thank you.
And happy Juneteenth.
Bye-bye.